Well, I can start with the theme music. Well, you guys want to just start with that?
Uh, you know what? Let's just go right into it. Let's just go right into it today.
Okay, I got the screen pulled up. Welcome to Ancient News, everybody. Sorry, DJ Two Coats is kind of late. Yeah. John Kwama and Eric Baskerville are our hosts. We are documenting the quarantine and also just talking about general topics and stuff. I thought we had an interesting conversation last time, talking a little bit about Heart of Darkness a little bit last time, and I think there's a tinge of the last century in the undercurrent of our discussions of what the quarantine means, possible power grabs, impositions on personal liberty. You know what I mean? And there's a weird, oh shit, my beer is just totally overflowing onto the desk. Okay. Well,
Gotta chug that, Joe.
but what I wanted to say is right, like, because Heart of Darkness is like kind of about colonialism, right? And so like a lot of the systemic problems that the quarantine brings into relief can trace their roots back to the colonial era, right? So I mean, it's a bit of a stretch, but it was funny how we arrived talking about Heart of Darkness and that sort of thing. Let me.
I don't think that anything about what you're talking about is a stretch. But
Well, discuss.
I feel like I spent a lot of time talking about um, some of the opinionated facts that I had last go round. So I just want to see what you guys have to say.
Say about what though?
Okay, so
Just like
um,
attached to what the fuck I was saying, or
oh yeah, attached to essentially what you were saying. I mean, now we're at a point where it's like here we are. 90% of Maryland is opened up. So got Mo County and PG County that don't have a way of really opening up yet because a lot of the cases have been here.
yeah. Okay, so
But
opening up is going to happen, right? But I think I really want to continue in the thread that John was having on the episode that we had with Chuck the other night,
oh, okay.
which is that John was putting together, I would say, a pretty convincing case. No, I mean it's true. It is true, right? Okay, but here's the deep-seated postmodern meta-fiction irony of the whole shit, right? Is that because the Trump administration is completely incompetent, right? Is the reason why we had to take the measures that we had, right? But then at the very same time, when he appeals to his base, he's like, they're taking your rights away, right? But the only reason that any rights have been temporarily suspended, and as you were saying in your argument too, most of it is simply dubious emergency powers that, if challenged in the Supreme Court or something of this nature, would probably not hold up, right? And I would agree with that assessment as well. But the reason there's a deep irony in the fact that the reason why the states have to take these measures is because of the complete incompetence of the Trump administration, right? But then at the same time, he benefits politically from that because he gets on Twitter and he's like, fuck these governors, and they're trying to take your guns, right? So, like, he's firing up his base because the economy isn't good anymore, right? And we all know that nobody fucking gets... One of the number one things that makes it so that an incumbent president gets reelected is whether they have a good economy or not, right? If there's a good economy, they have a way better, larger chance of being elected again, right? And he doesn't have that anymore. That's part of the reason why he wants to reopen, right? So it's like he can take his incompetence and be like, oh, he passes it off onto the states and be like, the states have to decide, right? But then he completely benefits from the state of the shutdown being like, oh, they're trying to take your rights away, they're trying to take your guns, right? So like there's a deep-seated irony there, right? That's another layer on top of the situation that I think that John was correctly identifying, because I worry about that as well, right? Like, okay, if you say, oh, well, we're going to grant these emergency powers, like when will they ever get taken away? It's never built into the architecture of them saying, okay, here's more power, right? It's like Pandora's box. You take the shit out of the box, it's out of the box. It's not going back into the box, right? And if you look at the history of the American presidency, right, you have Thomas Jefferson being like, we need to protect against a tyrant. And then Jefferson becomes president and founds a branch of the military without the approval of Congress, right? Like, just the most ridiculous, like, power grab ever, right? He's like, Louisiana Purchase? Fuck yeah. Like, just fucking approve it. I don't need Congress, right? Like, and that's fucking Jefferson, right? So, post World War II, you've seen a steady rise in the powers of the presidency, right? Like we saw it with Obama, right? Because it's like, okay, these powers have been granted with me. I inherited them. Well, I just have to fucking use them now, right? That's what the argument always is. And so what I'm saying with Trump is that there is a deep-seated irony there on top of the layer of the argument that John says, is that he's literally taking advantage. He can reframe his incompetence as, here's another reason for my base to get fired up, right? So like there's a sort of twistedness to the situation, because it's like his incompetence drives like this division, right, and like causes civil unrest, and it's just a fucking distraction from the fact that he's fucking incompetent, right? So,
well, I got to make a couple points. If Trump's incompetent, that means every other world leader is too, because barring like a handful, everyone else took the same steps. The only reason he can blame it on somebody else is the way that our government is set up. So yeah, he said, hey, states' rights, you guys are the governors, you should do it this way. And if anything, I'm more worried about our reaction to the powers administrated. The government's going to do what the government's going to do.
You don't see his incompetence as somewhat fucking unique?
How can you call it incompetence? Everyone else is doing the exact same thing. They're even saying now that China should have taken further action. New Zealand is dropping the most archaic, draconian censorship laws. They basically said they can just come into your house, check, like backdoor your computer, all that stuff. And they're saying the prime minister, is the greatest prime minister in the world just because she's got a vagina. Like, everyone is taking the exact same steps. The only place that isn't is Sweden. And they keep trying to play that they have the highest per capita or per million deaths.
So you see this as a worldwide, like.
Well, tell me somebody who's taken different actions than Trump.
No. Well, I mean, I'm not.
And that's the
with
thing.
Trump, it's a lack of action, right?
But like, that's my point. Tell me anyone else who did anything differently than Trump outside of Japan, Korea, and China. China did the most.
Why do those get excluded though?
Because they're the only people that obviously did anything before February.
I can't say that this is totally true. I don't know the facts.
So you would say this is a Western nation problem?
No, I think everyone's reacting is in the exact same way. I just don't see anyone else who took any action at all. If you're following the WHO's lead or the CDC's lead, you were told that it's not even, you can't even contract it from human to human contact, let alone animal to human contact. Now they're finding out that all that's true. Like if we were paying attention in January, which few people were, everyone was being told it was a joke. So I get that it's easy to pin it on Trump, and he's probably got
Well, no, I'm
a
not
lot to
pinning the
blame
whole
for.
situation on Trump. I'm saying insofar as
Yeah,
how
but you're
our
saying his
our
actions-
shit in this country has been managed. Not to say, and that's
But
not
are
to
you-
the
but I mean,
that's not to the
that's-
exclusion of other fucking countries' fuckery, right? But
my point is, who's doing it differently and better? Who is not experiencing the same levels of death?
okay, but that's the
Anywhere.
thing is that there's a direct correlation between how draconian the measures are, right, and how well the problem is solved. Because plague isolation is not like if you think about the way that it was handled back in the day, or even if you think about the Black Plague, the way that isolation was handled, you know what I mean? Like it makes what we have to deal with, not that much of a fucking imposition.
Yeah, that's my point.
Right.
Like, there's nothing.
So, but what I'm saying is there's a direct connection between, okay, you have a suspension of rights, and you have better results as far as the virus is spreading, right? Because everybody's like, oh, they're taking away our rights, but it's like, dude, the virus doesn't care about your rights; it's just going to kill you, right? So
yeah, but that's what everyone's going to have to prove at the end of this. They're going to have to prove that anything done now was justified. The reason I bring up
oh, you mean like a kind of Ender's Game, like this is, if you do it, then you can't tell me that the counterfactual would have been true, right? Because I did
no,
it, right?
no, not even that. Just like, okay, as citizens, yeah, you want to have faith in the people that are positioned to have authority over you. I don't know why you would, but a lot of people do. And you want to think that they're acting with your best interests at heart. But I don't believe that for a second. The reason our government is set up that way is because I can't take any of that on faith.
Sure.
So they skipped all those steps. They declared it an emergency when, at the end of it, if we look at the numbers, what happens if it proves that it's no worse than any other kind of sickness? It's just new.
I mean, is that a better safe than sorry sort of thing?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean,
The
well,
numbers they projected for SARS, H1N1 was all the same.
yeah, but
all
clearly
just
this
as
is
apocalyptic.
far different from those spreads because way more people have died. You know what I mean? Like an
I
astronomical.
don't think at the end of the day we have higher death numbers. I think we have an accelerated response.
Yeah, but it's all over. It's worldwide. It's a worldwide.
It's worldwide. It's big. It's scary.
I mean,
And
we're
they
going to
were-
hit 100,000 deaths in. Actually, let me pull up this website because I found this website really interesting. I think it was called World Reports or something. It's just a counting website, but they count other stuff besides the virus shit.
Yeah,
you know what I
but
mean? They're
here's
just
the
a
other thing,
They're
like,
just a.
We're counting clouds. Every
No.
country-
I had we went over the problems with counting last time, so I don't disagree with you there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And like at the end of the day, even if there's 1 billion people that die from this, does it justify it?
I mean, I don't know.
I don't think so. I think that the reactions that are happening on the ground, the things that people and private businesses are doing to stay afloat, make more sense than the lumbering, slow, bureaucratic, clogged up, reactions that the governments have. They can't react to something like this. At the end of the day, everyone's like, oh, we should have bought more masks. And it's like, well, people are just making their own. People are reacting to it like the only way they know how. Because you have to assume that there's nobody at the end of it to help you out. 70% of people aren't receiving their unemployment checks. And then there's a bigger problem now. Now they're seeing that people who are getting this bonus check, this increased unemployment check, are saying that it makes more sense to stay at home.
Okay, so let's.
it's-
Yeah, I mean,
We're
yeah.
in like a zombie economy, and it's not the fun kind. Like, it's not. We don't get to shoot them.
Okay. So yeah, worldometer. I mean, I do agree with the zombie economy. I mean, I think this situation is more like a real life like zombie movie kind of thing. I mean, I don't think it's quite there yet as in terms of the survivalism, but it is in terms of the okay, like here's the if the society is a table, what happens when you chop a leg off, right? Like this.
Oh,
sort
what
of
happens when you just take the tabletop off? The whole everyone
yeah.
everyone
Yeah.
talks about the economy like it's not, you know, you getting paid.
No, oh, dude, I totally realize that shit. Are you kidding
And like
me?
everyone talks about it like it's this push button
Right.
1900s fucking flapping machine, like one of those steam powered, you know, horse and buggies. It's every interaction we make with each other.
Yeah,
Time.
it's not just the Jetsons like factory that makes cogs,
Yeah,
right?
It makes cogs and what is widgets or whatever the hell it is. Like
So, Spacely sprockets.
Spacely sprockets. That's the shit.
Okay,
Yeah.
so coronavirus cases right now, we have 4.7 million in the world, right? And then 313,000 of deaths about. And then also and that's a nice statistic to include, right? 1.8 million recovered. So that's close to 1/4, right? They have been saying that, right? Like that, you know, people will. The country breakdown is also interesting because that's what I'm saying, John. Is like I'm not saying that all countries weren't really ready for this shit, but it's a scoreboard thing here, right? Like so.
But that's the problem. How has it just simplified to that? Why is there just a daily death?
Well, it's
tracker?
not simplified because population density.
That's totally simplified. The first thing you said was the death toll. We're talking about something. When you talk about death tolls, of course people are going to react to that as an emergency. But
Well,
if
let's take a
brought
closer
up
look
the
at the
fact
numbers.
that you
then.
have a 98% chance of recovering from it, like, would it be treated with the same kind of severity?
Well, no, we have that. Me and you and Eric probably have that survival
Sure.
rate, but that's not, you know, obviously that's not across the board, you know.
It's not no diseases across the board. You're not going to die of sickle cell. I might, or you're not going to pass it on to your kid. I might.
All right, are
You
you
might
guys
have
ready?
it and not even know it.
Sure.
I feel like it's fair enough to say that I've waited a while to just
Yeah, no, go ahead.
2 points in. The first thing I want to say, based off of listening to you guys, I think you're both making the same point, just on different fronts. There's a lot of reasons why this virus has affected people economically, and there's a lot of reasons why this has affected people morally. I don't think it's fair to say that those two things are not one and the same with what we're dealing with right now. I think in regards to you two's arguments, that it is important that we understand the position that we're putting everybody in as far as the risk. Because the risk alone is across the board. If we can't survive as a financial system, then we're not going to be able to have these moralistic values that we have for everybody that is involved with the virus. Because
poor
then
and
we
have
have to start.
morals.
What I'm saying is that we have to start having more calculated decisions based off of both of those things, and not just being like, "Hey, we got to save everybody's life," and also not being like, "Well, everybody's just a number." I think it's more
Well, it's
important.
not
that
even that. It's not even that.
Well, I think when it comes, well, I would argue that I think that both of the, I would argue that I think that both of the things are one and the same, and I think that in order to come to a consensus about what it means to quote unquote get back to where we were as far as normalization goes, then both of those things need to be taken into account.
I don't think that we're disagreeing here. I think that we're making different points. You know what I mean? Because
I think you're making. Well, no. Let me be clear.
I'm not trying to be sensationalistic when I bring up the numbers, right? But just looking at this column, right? The total cases, right? You could add up all of the cases in the world, right? And we stack up against them significantly. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Sure.
That's all I'm saying, and I'm not saying that it hasn't been mismanaged by governments across the world, because obviously, in some larger sense, in terms of Western democratic systems, like Trump is not the problem. He's a symptom of the problem.
Yeah.
He's a product of the system. He's a product of the system.
Hold on.
Yeah.
But what John's
Let me just say real quick.
Let me just finish the statement. The only thing that I'm trying to say here is that John's talking about the endemic problems of the system and what's the world going to be like afterwards. But for me, when I think at least about this country, I'm like, no, when history looks back on this shit, they're going to be like, this dude was worse than all the all the rest of them.
I think you're totally right to say that, but hold on, let me just make my point real quick, John. I'll be very brief, I swear.
Just say it.
Look, just listen.
What, you want me to bat my eyes at you?
I'm
Go
gonna make
and
3
spit it
points.
out, motherfucker.
I'm gonna make 3 points. First point I'm gonna make is that when it comes to the statistics that you're showing us, I'm gonna be straight up honest with you. Not everybody is being honest about their numbers. Period.
No, they're not. Obviously, China's
only got 5,000 deaths.
Let me
Fuck to go,
be more specific than that. Nobody is being as honest as we're being about our numbers.
dude, we don't even know what our numbers are because we don't have.
Yeah,
we don't have.
know what the fuck our numbers are, but we're trying to make something up that's closer to something that's actually realistic than these motherfuckers trying to say that they've only got, tens of thousands of cases.
I mean, I think you could doubt like the.
There are people dying in the back of trucks that aren't insulated in order for their bodies to decompose at right pace. Like, there are people that are not able to go to the funeral for their parents.
Yeah.
So we can talk about the moral thing, but what I'm trying to say to you two is that you're both making the same point, and it's on two different fronts.
Are you gonna put me in timeout?
Wait, what? No. That's not what I'm saying at all.
This is fine.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is like, to your point, we can say that Donald Trump is a fucking stupid ass motherfucker. Totally right about the fact that he's an asshole and he's stupid and he says a lot of things that are contradictory to the thing that he said the night before. Sure. But nobody's going to look back in history and try to say that we didn't do the best to our ability, because at this point in time, when you look at the statistics and when you look at the news, everything is only about us.
Yeah, but the reason
Stop
why it's
watching the
talked
news.
about so much is because what is it? This is month 3 or whatever, and there's still no coherence.
Is that they're only talking about.
If anyone gave it, it's been going on since last year. But
The incompetence has. I'm talking.
Right. It doesn't matter.
You're saying that history's going to remember him as the worst president, and I'm saying we don't handle this right, it won't matter.
That's true as well. Those aren't mutually exclusive, though.
There have been efforts made by this country and every other country to actually completely disrupt every normal human interaction
Yeah.
like that we engage in.
Yeah.
I have cops coming down my street saying that you're engaging in unlawful assembly when people are sitting on their stoops. There's something fundamentally wrong with that. People can't go to work in the attempt of making money for themselves organically. They're being told to wait for handouts that don't come, and they're saying that it's your job to do this to save other lives.
Right.
It is disgusting. Whoever's in charge of it, however is in charge of it. Like,
Yeah.
the fact that this pill went down as easily as it did makes me question whether any of the freedom talk, any of the liberty junk is still valid when we look at people who are actually protesting on it as fucking yahoos, and the best people that we can get on TV are fucking yahoos, when there's a legitimate aspect to resisting this.
Well, there's also the thing of that because most regular people are struggling, right? Like they can't hop in their SUV and take their $80.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So
down to the Capitol, you know what I mean? They're worried about the day to day, right? So,
but if you have nothing going, I don't see why everyone isn't down there right now. That's what I mean. So we've ceded optics to some clearly. Like, you want to talk about incompetence, I talk about those as incompetent protests, but there's consistent protests from regular people. It's not just all these fucking, fat
kind of shit doesn't get on the news,
Escalades.
Right? Like that shit up with the pipeline in South or North Dakota or whatever, right? Like that shit, they won that shit. But you will never see that shit on the news.
No,
you know what I mean?
And that's why it can't be your primary or even your single source of information.
Let me tell you something. At this point, Donald Trump doesn't have to be the savior of the pandemic in order for him to be reelected. He's the only one that's been put in a position against his opponents that has to deal with something like this. So why would you want to go and elect somebody else that hasn't had to deal with this yet? I mean, we could talk about the recession.
I wouldn't say that he's been dealing with it all that much.
Talk about the recession when it comes to Joe Biden, but outside of that,
it doesn't matter. Joe Biden's irrelevant. It's just bad economies don't bode well for incumbent presidents. That's a statistical fact.
Right about that.
The stink of 100,000 deaths doesn't run off on the guy.
Well, it seems like the economy fucking matters more to people than the fucking deaths do. Like that's the fucked up part.
It's human nature. I don't know why anyone else is acting differently. If
you're
doing all right and there's massive death and devastation around you, people find a way to deal with that.
Just a second. Bennett just joined us, guys.
Let's take a pause. Let's.
Well, actually, I was on a little earlier. Like I listened to.
Sorry, Bennett.
No, it's okay. You guys,
creepy voyeur.
No, because I thought you guys could see me, and then I realized when you were talking that you couldn't. I guess, and I was like, oh, shit.
I could see you.
Yeah. I was like, there's shit stuck between my teeth, so I went and fucking got it out because it was just driving me crazy.
Oh, you wanted to look sexy on camera.
No, it was just driving me insane. It was like.
Oh yeah, when it's right up there in the molar, Jesus.
Just a quick synopsis / question. So what we're talking about is that we're coming from two different angles here. We're talking about the presidency and why it doesn't bode well for the pandemic for Donald Trump and all the decisions that he's decided to make internationally in foreign affairs, and some of the answers that people are giving internationally as well. And in particular, I think the biggest thing that is definitely hitting home, as far as I can understand from what Joe and John are talking about, is where do we all stand about just like where do we all stand at the end of what we feel like is the end of this pandemic? Where do we all stand at? But
Yeah, no, I mean,
what's happening
What
now?
end?
How's it affecting you?
What
Says,
end?
yeah.
What end, bro?
What do you think, Bennett?
well, I mean, I don't know how this is all going to end. I have no idea whatsoever. To your previous points, like I see that both what John was saying and what Joe was saying and how you were trying to compare them. But I mean, you know, we obviously could have handled this better. I'm no fan of Donald Trump. I think that he's done some dumb shit during this, but I think that he's done some good shit during this. Like when he shut the flights off to China early on, that was smart. Even though he got
Yeah, I
called
mean,
against it.
I won't. There's nothing to argue against there.
Yeah,
I
no.
would say maybe a little
Yeah.
earlier would have been better, but you know.
Well, at the
Oh,
time
are
he
you
was
kidding
being
me?
called a racist for doing it.
The whole
By
time they're
everybody in
saying
the
he's a
major media.
racist.
They
The
said he
mayor of
was-
New
yeah.
York went to Chinatown and started hugging Asian people like a fucking
Clown.
hair commercial clown. Like, what the fuck was that
It was
about?
crazy. It was crazy. It was nuts.
Pelosi was in San Francisco licking Asian shit off the street to make him look like a racist. Like,
Yeah.
there's no. Here's why I think I find myself defending Trump as much as I do, because there's no reason attached to the criticisms of him, and calling him incompetent is assuming that there is a clear plan that is reasonable and better. There is no.
But his incompetence isn't not limited simply to the virus, John. Like, if you look at the head
I'm not,
of
but
literally
we're just
every.
talking about the virus. We could talk about the rest of his dumb ass.
Well, I'm just
later.
saying. Look
But
at everyone that he's put at the head of a federal agency is basically completely fucking unqualified and bad at their job.
Who's qualified to steal my money?
Who's
That's
qualified
all
to be
I see
president?
when you tell me that you're a
Qualified to be
federal.
president. I mean, let's be honest.
You're a
Like-
federal person. Like, who's qualified to take
I just
my
love
money
that. That's
and then
such
put
the-
it towards bombs in
That's
fucking
such the-
Afghanistan.
Do you have to jump over sidewalks because you hate them so much?
Believe me, we would build sidewalks and roads without the fucking government. And honestly, I can do better myself in my own neighborhood.
Okay,
I
I
might
love
have
that
to.
because that gives me a reason. Let's shift to a lighter note here. John? Have you ever read the Libertarian Detective Agency story before?
I've never even heard of it.
Oh my God! Just give me a second. Give me a second here to punch it up.
Well, while he's pulling up that, John, I'm just gonna have to say, like, first of all, who's qualified to actually be president? First of all,
Who? Yeah,
second.
give me one person.
like, second of all, to your point, I mean, dude, I can be the president of the United States, say whatever the fuck I want to say, and nobody's gonna care. Nobody's gonna care. Why was nobody gonna care? Because I'm the president of the fucking United States.
Okay,
They're gonna hear what I have to say, and they're gonna be like, oh, well,
this
there
shit.
you go. There he goes again.
This shit is fucking hilarious because this is what you were saying when you said that point. It reminded me of this. So it's a libertarian police department, right? I was shooting heroin and reading The Fountainhead in the front seat of my privately owned police cruiser when a call came in.
That's why I laughed so hard.
I put a quarter in the radio to activate it. It was the chief. Bad news, detective. We've got a situation. What, is the mayor trying to ban trans fats again? Worse, somebody just stole $447 million worth of bitcoins. The heroin needle practically fell out of my arm. What kind of monster would do something like that? Bitcoins are the ultimate currency. Virtual, anonymous, stateless. They represent true economic freedom not subject to arbitrary manipulation by any government. Do we have any leads? Not yet, but mark my words. We're going to figure out who did this, and we're going to take them down, provided someone pays us a fair market rate to do so. He laughed. That's why you're the best I got, Lazowski. Now you get out there and find those bitcoins. I'm on it. I put a quarter in the siren. 10 minutes later, I was on the scene. It was a normal office building, strangled on all sides by public sidewalks. I hopped over them and went inside.
Piece of shit. Fuck you.
Now, which one of you punks is going to pay me to investigate this crime? Come on, I said. Don't you understand that the protection of private property is the foundation of all personal liberty? seriously, guys, without a strong economic motivator, I'm just going to stand here and not solve this case. Cash is fine, but I prefer being paid in gold bullion or autographed Ben Gillette posters.
I want to go somewhere private. Finish yourself off, Joe. Jesus Christ!
Come on. That's fucking funny.
This is filthy. This is fucking filthy. Listen, if I did the same thing with just every stereotype I could think of.
Oh, dude, but I'm fair game, dude. I'll criticize the left. The left is.
I got a good one for you. Hold on.
That's just, but it's funny.
It's funny.
Wait, Joe. Let me tell you this one. I got a good one for you because it's so relevant to the story.
Yeah.
The other day, John was over at Kelly and I's house, right? And we were watching a show, and it's a show called 24 Hours to Hell and Back with Gordon Ramsay.
Oh my God.
Now, the show itself is a totally different story, but at the time, I was like, yo, let's just order a bunch of pizza and eat shitty food and watch this show, right? So we ordered shitty food from Papa John's, right? We're eating the pizza, and in the middle of the show, Kelly and John go, like, who put together this pizza? Like, who thought this would be a good idea? And I was like, me. And they were like, we could have got better pizza than that. And I was like, better ingredients, better pizza, Papa John's. It's in the slogan. And so
this is
only
all
what they're
John's
saying
work.
only has to be true.
This is all John's work. He said there's gonna be a reckoning. Look at us now. You didn't believe him. He's eating 30 fucking pizzas a month. You guys.
If he said it was gonna be better ingredients, then it only had to be true.
He said it doesn't.
Okay.
It's not the same as when he was there. That's what he said.
That's what you're saying? Okay, so if Donald Trump tells us that we can shoot up a little bit of that, that good.
I can do that right fucking now. I can walk outside and get some heroin if I fucking wanted to. That's my right as a citizen of Baltimore. I was actually on a call where the state's attorney, Mosby, was on the call. So I sat down to a Zoom call with our neighborhood, the Auchentrolley Terrace. And there's a bunch of little old ladies who are worried about a lot of shit. They're worried about, the crime, because that's the prime motivator here, and it's always going to be. They're worried about the fact that they decriminalize a whole raft of laws and that they're setting prisoners out into the streets because of this emergency. So that's what people are really concerned about. And she came on with her stump speech about how, decriminalizing drugs and prostitution are harmless crimes. And I wish I'd fucking recorded it, because at the end of the day, my only question was, will you have the same opinion when all this shit's over? And then you're going to start slamming the cuffs on people who are just doing harmless crimes.
All right, I got a lot of points.
So that's the real world context of libertarianism.
There are two.
Leave me the fuck alone.
I'm more
That's my
interested
point.
in what Ben has to say about this. What do you think?
In terms of just the decriminalization, or, I mean, we're moving.
I would say
several
just
directions.
across the board, when both John and I was saying.
And what John's saying is 100% accurate. I hope somebody did record that, because when this is all over,
I don't think
play
so.
back
They're
to her.
pretty bad with technology.
Yeah, I wish that somebody had done that on a Zoom meeting with her, and had her saying that on the record, because it should be decriminalized.
Yeah.
That's the exact sort of thing that should happen.
Yeah.
No, I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
With that stance.
I mean, just trying to stop people from doing things. That's where I fall into libertarian stuff. If you're doing something and it's not really hurting someone, or it can't be directly traced to as hurting them, like it's a tenuous thing, like some of the time,
Yeah, it can be up to anybody.
every once in a while, it can happen. Sure, but whatever. If you want to jump out of a fucking airplane in a squirrel suit and fly through some fucking canyon, that shit's legal, and that'll kill your ass.
Yeah.
How
What's
the
the
how
what's
the
the
fuck
what's
is
the
that
rate on
racist?
that versus Corona?
Yeah, dude. Like, what is that? That's a crime of class then, because only people with enough money can do something like that, which could absolutely fucking kill them. And then they
Yeah,
end up
yeah.
killing
What
someone
happened
else or
about
damaging private property, die in some crazy fashion. People can base jump. People can fucking get into a. People can get into an octagon and die. Just get kicked in the
what was
fucking
that
head
thing
and
that
die.
happened? It was
You
like
know?
ski football.
Say what?
What's Sonny Bono? Didn't he die like playing ski football or some shit?
No, he was just skiing
Oh,
down. He just was
he was
skiing and hit a
skiing,
tree. That's
which
basically an
again-
automotive accident for Nordic
I
people.
think, I'm sorry, that must have been like the Kennedy cousin that died by playing ski football.
Oh no, that
Yeah.
one. Maybe there's a lot of Kennedys who die in a lot of weird ways. That's for sure. So
Ah.
I could just not have one down.
My
I
name
still-
is Ebenezer Kennedy. I'm the first man to die with a titty in his mouth. I choked on the areola.
I was flying a helicopter in a sandstorm, even though I'd been warned, and I flew into a Sudanese pyramid. That's how I died.
Reminds me of that Far Side comic where it just shows the newspaper and the headline is Kennedy dog caught going through neighbor's trash.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I mean, as far as that goes, but in terms of, you know, what was the thing that led to you saying that, John? Because I can't remember.
Just deep-seated anger. No, we're talking about Eric was subtly alluding to the possibility of heroin being decriminalized. Like effectively it is for certain people and in certain circumstances here.
Yeah.
I don't care what you do to your body until it's necessary to start arresting people, or until your habit can't support itself and you have to commit some other crime to get heroin.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the results from decriminalizing or straight up legalizing are so drastic. It's incredible that every country doesn't do it right the fuck now.
Well, I believe most of a lot of countries in Western Europe have decriminalized it to the point where, which is how I think it should be treated, is they treat it as a health problem, right?
The only
like
country
Amsterdam.
that has successfully done it full end is Portugal. They're a small
Well,
country.
didn't Amsterdam do it first?
No. They still have several class level drugs, like Class A drugs, are still illegal.
But I know that they have like pretty cutting edge rehab for
They have a
heroin
lot of facilities set up, but the first country to just say, hey,
to
let's just
decriminalize
take-
as far as the books.
like
Yeah.
as far as everything. So Portugal, yeah, they decriminalized it. They set up facilities. They set up clean shooting up areas, clean drop zones.
Yeah, the
And
needles.
health
Yeah,
professionals going out to meet them every day, and that builds its whole own apparatus. But imagine you took the money from militarized vehicles and guns and all these people and just put them into the health apparatus.
right.
Because even if you just did a straight like for like cost, the benefit's huge.
Yeah.
The show I was watching with Eric was about saving the town, and they thought by redecorating 3 or 4 zhuzhy retarded businesses in Ellicott City, which floods every fucking summer, they're gonna save the town.
Right.
Meanwhile, they could have come here and actually made some principled arguments about, how are your laws enforced? What does the money get spent on? Does anyone have a receipt in Baltimore? Or is that just something you use to start fires in the middle of the night? Like, the only reason it's easy to go to a place like Ellicott City is because they still have a more or less homogeneous, white population. They're still one of these cutesy little towns that did go through a lot of shit, and they were getting back on their feet. But the kicker of that show was that through all of his efforts, you can't beat the things that are going on in real life. So that show was shot a couple weeks before the first lockdowns started happening, and it ends with like a charity disclaimer. Hey, these guys are still fucked. There's nothing they
They're
can
still-
do about
yeah.
it. They can't open their businesses, which were just getting back on their feet after 2 years.
After all the flooding, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of them was actually
Okay. Hold
destined to be knocked over because it's in the floodplain, so they're just knocking down blocks of buildings,
No,
historic buildings.
I want to
They
go
said,
back
"Fuck
to
it,
the.
we gotta go."
I want to go back to the original point, and I also want to make a point based off of what John just said. So, the original point is that they decided to save this town. John and I both were able to determine that there was going to be a disclaimer afterwards, knowing that this happened 2 months ago. That now the city shut down and there's nothing we can do. So a metaphorical flood happened,
Yeah.
and they weren't able to save the city the way that they hoped. So Fox lost a bunch of money, and not for nothing, Gordon Ramsay probably owes them a ton of money, which is why he's got fucking 3 different shows coming out during the summer. But at the same time, based off what you both were saying, I want to go back to what Joe was saying, and you don't have to believe this, John, but heroin is government funded in Amsterdam.
I'm not saying
they
it's not. I'm
are-
just saying that
They are allowing people to take heroin.
Yeah, he's not
Government
saying they don't have
funded.
programs. He's saying that the only place that really legally has decriminalized everything is Portugal, which I believe
or
that
even the
is
first across the
true.
board, because
Right.
they're
Oh, so we're
theirs
talking
was
about
so
first.
Well, I mean, just the
He's talking about the justice system aspect of
and
it.
the just
No,
the
I'm
broad-
talking about the justice system aspect as well. You can look it up. We can look it up right now.
I'm just saying, from weed to LSD and fucking adrenochrome, they're like, yeah, it's
No,
basically
you can
just
get
decriminalized.
government. You go to facilities in Amsterdam.
Yeah, it's called
You're
methadone.
allowed
Yeah, it's
to
a substitute though.
heroin.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. It's not as effective as they
Yeah.
make it
Give me,
out to
give
be.
me my Chinese fentanyl.
Right.
Let me
Exactly.
stand around like a twitchy scarecrow all afternoon.
Yeah, that's a growth industry that's going to be happening during all this.
Oh, did you guys see that Vice
domestic-
documentary on the only place that it's I guess besides Portugal that you can get quaaludes is South Africa, and they crunch it up into a powder and they fucking put it in
let's get-
a
okay,
J.
before-
They put it in a spliff and they smoke that shit,
Jesus Christ.
and
Before we
they
can-
smoke it and they fucking just
I could never do drugs now.
Okay,
just instantly fall asleep.
Yeah.
Before we get outside of the point, we're only saying this because these governments have commissioned for this to be possible because they don't want people to do drugs. That's why we make it free.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit here.
Now, did government commission you?
I wanna talk about this. This is a new segment that we're gonna have here on the Ain't Shit News, and it's maybe I've just read too much George Orwell or whatever, but it's the 5 minutes of hate, right? We're just
Think we're not already doing that?
well, I mean, we do it in general, but I just have to bring this one particular story
You
up.
really don't like Miller.
Oh,
Okay,
dude, this
Miller.
guy. First of all, okay,
if,
so
if you want me to poke fun at Miller, can you at least show me his hot?
Oh, the dude Stephen Miller.
Can you just show
Steve-
me his hot wife and put her on?
Oh,
put her
if we're
on
gonna
screen?
do this segment for the next 30 minutes, I might as well just put my wife on here.
yeah, that's her right there. You think she's pretty smoking, huh?
She's
Yeah.
pretty good.
It's hot.
No, I'm saying if we're gonna talk
I
shit
agree.
about people, I might as well just.
But my thing is how did she choose to breed?
Choose? You think there are choices at that level? She was promised. She was hand delivered. She made sacrifices to Moloch and the rest of those fucking psychos.
Look at this fucking guy, dude.
Yeah, they're grays. They're not here
Okay,
for
you want to
our
know what? You know how we've been doing the photo comparison thing, So he looks like the leader, right? Like the Hulk villain with the giant forehead. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah. yeah.
Megamind?
Or is that the brain?
Nah, it's the leader. Here we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
He
okay.
looks
you
like
go.
this guy,
There
dude.
you go. Man, talk. The
Hold on, let's get
mind
the
taker.
side by side here. The side by side. Samuel Stearns.
Oh, the mind.
That's
Good fucking Christ.
Yeah.
that's pretty.
Yeah. The eyebrows are pointier, but like.
So
That's
like
just
I said,
this rendering of it.
alien.
I thought the mind was purple.
Alien.
But it's just giant forehead itis. But it's
Why
just
haven't we started selling fucking masks?
I
yet?
thought the
look at this.
I thought the mind was purple.
No, that's the.
That's
guy
Purple
from-
Man.
Yeah, it's Jessica
Okay.
Jones.
Yeah, she is pretty cute there, but I mean, she chose to
There's
breed with
better
that guy.
pictures of her.
Now she's paying the ultimate price.
She's not gonna die.
I don't want anyone to die. I'm
Yeah,
just
but she's not gonna die.
it's just the irony. It's the irony of like, this is the White House. That shit should be, triple
we talked
checked.
about it. It's the Equalizer. There's no one who's hiding from this. I'm the only one hiding from it in the middle of fucking like the less
Urban
equal-
wasteland.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
One
just
of the
can't.
reasons why the regular population in Sweden is doing so well, they have the highest single household population,
Yeah.
like one of the highest single household population. You know where they're having real problems? The same places everyone else is having real problems. In nursing homes, hospitals, and other places where you congregate by the thousands. Like, and are just old and decrepit and really waiting for death to happen. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
She's
There's
not
a.
gonna die, and if she does, she was weak anyway. Fuck it. Like, swear to God,
I swear to God.
just hot and weak.
What's her name? Jessica Miller.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's get the.
That's a pretty straightforward name. It's gonna get you a lot of hits.
Yeah. That's,
You're gonna have to be more specific. I think that she kept her last name.
you just put Stephen Miller's wife.
There she is.
Oh, it's not even just.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's very pretty. Yeah, she's quite attractive.
Yeah.
Okay, so my question is right, like, because he is like super like fuck Latinos, you know what I mean? But then yet she is clearly not just white Anglo-Saxon Protestant here.
Hold
Like,
on, time out. Look
what's
at
going
her.
on here?
Hold on, time out. Look at her. She's Jewish. Period.
You really want to walk down this road? Government built or not? That's the
We've
dangerous
already
road.
arrived.
Government
with
built
Joe-
or not?
Well, he is
Yeah.
too, so that
Already
makes
arrived
sense.
with
Yeah.
Joe's question.
I mean, they're
This
just
is the game
whatever.
we're
They're
gonna
keeping
play.
it kosher, but
Look at her.
she has.
Exactly. We're
You,
keeping
you
it
shake
kosher.
her family
Look
tree
at
in
her.
Africa is
Look
falling
at
out of
her.
that shit. Like him, not so much.
I'm
Him-
not interested in the tree. I'm more
You know what?
interested in the bush.
You know what? You know what?
Oh, what you gonna see? You gonna get a revelation when it's lit on fire?
I hope it's burning.
Look, Wiki, Stephen Miller's wife.
What's
No.
that?
Wiki, Stephen Miller's wife.
No, but I
Okay.
had the most ridiculous conversation with my dad, and he said that Stephen Miller is an anti-Semitic Jew, and I was like, "You're watching entirely too much
You mean he's a
television."
self-hating Jew?
Yeah.
That doesn't make
No,
him.
they said he was a white supremacist, anti-Semitic Jew.
I mean,
and
he
like,
does have those tendencies, but I don't.
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
What does
it doesn't
that
mean,
mean?
it's just not.
What it means is that he associates people with people that are like contra the interests of his own heritage.
That's
or
just
whatever.
called being
No,
stereotypical.
stop,
That's to make it anti-Semitic.
No, that's some bullshit. That's some
How is that
bullshit.
not bullshit?
It's
Yeah,
because
well, no,
it's
no,
like-
well, there's
bullshit
one-
because then you have to then basically create a set of categories. You have to make every Jewish person think the exact same thing for that to work.
No. That's not what I was saying. What I was saying
Quite
is
literally with Nazis, and you're 100% correct. But in any other scenario, that's basically saying that an entire ethnic group of people all have one uniform type of thought.
No. That's not what I was saying. What I was saying is Stephen Miller has associated with what you would call, what is it? What's that new word for the like white power? The Richard Spencer brand, right? What are they? How do they
Richard
brand
Spencer was
themselves?
on CNN.
How
at
do
the
they
beginning
brand
of the
themselves
year.
to like try
The
to make
white
themselves
I don't know.
white
but-
nationalism? Like he's
No, but
associated with some of those elements. Like
Yeah, but
I
would
didn't
need-
do
I would
that.
need-
He
I
did
would
that.
need to see- I would
what I'm
need to
saying
see
is
the list
based off
of
of
those-
what you just said about what you based off what you just said about Judaism. I think that Ben is trying to make a point about understanding that if something's anti-Semitic or not doesn't mean that everybody falls into the same category. I agree with that.
I wasn't trying to say that. What I was the
Well,
only
that's just
point I
how it
was
came
making is that
across.
he is associated with Richard Spencer-esque fucking elements
I would
before.
need to see the names of those groups and know what they were about. Because here's the thing,
Or what his involvement was.
like that's an easy thing to say, just because he has positions that are not generally been believed to be held by the quote unquote progressive Jewish community or just Jewish community in general, right? Like he has opinions that don't fit that. He is in the Republican Party. This is just a situation of degrees. He may be associated with those people, Joe. I'm not saying he's not, but unless I can see hard names claiming that for the groups and then basically then figure out, okay, what do these groups have a history of? It's just like, because I doubt maybe he is really up on Richard Spencer, because Richard Spencer isn't.
Okay, so it's right here.
Okay, what is it?
Wiki. Miller and the Duke Conservative Union helped co-member Richard Spencer.
Co-member. So he was in a group. He was in the Duke Conservative.
But I'm not saying
Richard
that he's
Spencer
come
was in
straight
the
out.
group
He
with
has
it.
he has not come straight out and like made the same things, right? But he
So
runs
he
in the same. I'm saying he ran in the same circles.
Well, he's a conservative.
so
Well, yes, but there's
he's a
you can be a
Duke alumnus,
conservative and
and
not
we
run
all
in those
know that
circles,
they're
right?
fucking-
If you look at what Miller and the Duke Conservative Union helped co-member, which meant that your union is, of course, most likely going to help someone who was a co-member get up somewhere. Like maybe he is exactly what you say he is, but like even if you just scroll back up to that, like and look at it again, help a student time with fundraising.
I'm sorry, that was the term I was looking for. Was alt-right, right? That's how they.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's the phrase.
That's how the normies.
Okay,
talk about
so listen to
everyone
this.
who's
Listen to this. In a 2016 interview, Spencer said he had mentored Miller at Duke.
Yeah.
Describing their close relationship, Spencer said that he was kind of glad no one's talked about this for fear of harming Trump. In a later blog post, he said the relationship had been exaggerated. In a later one, Miller has said he has absolutely no relationship with Mr. Spencer and that he completely repudiates his views and his claims are 100% false, right? So
That's just
so
politics.
that alone tells you
It tells me nothing.
no what it
tells me
that's
absolutely
his okay, his quote is basically like, I have to fucking distance myself from what I fucking used to do. You know what I mean?
Well,
like,
I
I'm not
think
saying
he
that
took
he
money
advocates
and took
for it.
pictures
Spencer,
with not only
But he
David
clearly
Duke,
he associated and ran in
Weinstein,
those circles, and you can't just say
Epstein.
conservative, because there's plenty of conservatives that
Well,
don't do that
hold
shit.
on. No, because the
Look,
evidence.
look,
you're saying-
Everyone, stop. The evidence that you're basing this off of is the fact that Richard Spencer, who is a media whore and will do anything to get his name on anything, that CNN has allowed him to come on multiple times. This Richard Spencer made the comment. He tried to steal some heat off, possibly.
That is also a possible outcome.
Off the back of a dude who he knew could be linked back to him because he was in the same union with him, right? He tried to steal some heat off the back of some guy. It is entirely possible. I want to repeat this. It's entirely possible that Stephen Miller has the associations that you're saying. But based upon the few lines that we just read, he was in a union with him that was a conservative union in 2007. He helped raise some money for a debate that Spencer was going to do, which is over 13 years ago, right? He helped them.
Ben, and not to cut you off.
I
remember,
don't believe that he was at that point identifying as a white supremacist or a Nazi. What are you saying?
Not to cut you off, but just to like confirm your point, remember he was at CPAC a couple of years ago, and that's when all the Russian flags were being flown around, and then the Republicans didn't even know. Even people that were the constituents, he knew, but everybody else didn't know. Do you remember
You
that?
you guys are getting too specific. What I contradicted you on was that you're saying that because this person knows this person, that person has the same ideas as this person.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
That's what you're saying. You're saying
I
because
don't think
he's
that's
associated
what
with
any of
Richard
us are
Spencer, he's guilty of the same sin.
No, no. I'm not painting him with a brush. I'm just
You
saying.
said he's associated with the alt-right.
Yeah.
It doesn't
What
mean
does-
that he
what
has the
does
same
that-
ideas. What it
But
means.
what does that mean to be associated with the
With the
alt-right?
alt-right. Yeah. It's like, what
The
is
Clintons were associated with Epstein. They were associated.
I wouldn't deny that.
With David Duke. They were
Don't,
associated.
I'm not gonna sit here and be
with
some
Weinstein.
Clinton defender.
No,
you know what I mean?
You're missing the point. I'm saying, what does it mean to be associated with somebody?
Yeah.
And what
Well,
guilt can
associated
I
with
have
kind of-
cast on me when you say I'm associated with something?
I would not. I would say it's a false equivalence to. No, hold on, because I'm going in the direction that you say. It is a false equivalence to be like, okay, just because these two people were in the same room, that they hold the same views. Like that's not what I'm saying. But I think if you take it in the totality of the rest of the shit that he has done and the essays that he has written and some of the stuff, if there's a spectrum of, okay, like on the top here you have like, how would you describe it? Like the most out there, like Alex Jones style, far right sort of stuff, or and then below that you have like the Richard Spencer sort of like or the Proud Boys dude Gavin McInnes, right? Like you try to dress up old Nazi ideas in hipster clothing,
And you've called them all right, and they would all argue that none of what they say has anything to do with the alt.
I'm aware of the divisions between alt-right is the conservative version of alternative radio in the 90s, right? It's a bunch of bands. It's a bunch of bands that don't belong in that category. I understand that aspect, but even within that spectrum of like, okay, here's the tinfoil hat, and then here's like the rebranded sort of
hear me out, Joe,
these
before-
elements coming out that were sort of underground, and now they've gotten some traction, post Tea Party and with Trump or whatever, however you want to talk. And then below that is Stephen Miller, right? So it's not me saying, oh, okay, because he was in the same room with this guy, he believes exactly the same thing, but he's only like 1 or 2 degrees removed from that direction. Because if you read his essays, if you read the essays that he used to write, there is a strong nationalism element in it. And that doesn't mean that he advocates for the same things as somebody like Richard Spencer, who intellectually, I would say, is not as coherent as Miller. Like, you can hate Miller, but he still has, some sort of coherent arguments. You know what I mean?
Joe, hear me out. I'm not trying to cut you off. Just hear me out here. Look, I don't think that anybody's trying to make valid points about, well, not valid points. Let me not say that. I don't think that anybody's trying to subject one particular subject to another. Okay, so what I'm saying to you is by saying that is that I think that we're all extremists. I think at this I think at this point in time in 2020, I think that all of the people that have positions of power that we're talking about are all extremists. So, like, to say that one person has a platform and others don't, and also to, like, perpetuate one platform doesn't make a lot of sense for me, because I think that you're right about what you're saying about Stephen Miller.
No, but I don't want to paint with a broad brush. I think the story's more complex than that.
Hold on. I think that what you're saying about the extremism, about their points, not about yours, about their points is valid, period, because it's valid for them. I mean, we could talk about how
No, we're not getting caught up in
is
relativism.
predominantly Democratic now. Their senator is Tim Walz.
The question
Now their governor is Tim Walz now.
The question is, when somebody says, I'm associated with somebody, what does that mean? Because if I hadn't pressed it, we would have glossed over it and gone and talked about something else. But if I'm associated with a criminal, am I guilty of a crime? That is the only reason I said anything. And just because it's Stephen Miller, of course people have their own, pre-knowledge. My dad said that after reading the same article that Joe's talking about, where they had some college essays. But the thing is, there's two questions. Yeah, if I'm associated with somebody who said some offensive shit or has committed a crime, am I guilty of that crime? And what's the statute of limitations on bad ideas or anything like that?
Yeah.
That's the point that I'm trying to make. Trying to make the same point that John's trying to make. The thing is that like we can sit here and try to act like Steve Miller did something wrong, or we can sit here and try to act like he didn't do anything wrong. But what it comes down to in the day and age that we live in is about the extremism that you're wanting to make for your point. So if I'm a criminal to a crime, did I kill that right? Like let's say that it's a murder for the audience.
Okay.
Did I kill that person for the right reason or didn't I? Let's say it's a complicated situation too. Like, I don't think I need to go into detail about that, but let's just say that it's a complicated situation too, and somebody had to die, and I had to have hands on that.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah.
I mean, I would hesitate to draw the analogy between that and his sort of murder scenario there, because I don't think that Miller's someone I politically disagree with.
I don't like him. I think that he's a fucking weasel. He's lied about. Here's the reason that I don't like him, and I prefer this type of explanation to the one
Roger Stone, right?
Yeah. Well, hold on. This is the type of explanation that I prefer to exactly what John is saying, right? What John is saying is sort of guilt by association is a very slippery slope. In certain instances, if someone is paired up with someone doing a particular thing very specifically, yeah, but just like knowing someone or having to run in the same circles with them when you're not that close. No, I would much rather focus on specifically what the person has done, or even if it's just some kind of fucking knee jerk of how they act. If you're like, I don't like Stephen Miller because he has beady eyes and a big old forehead and he looks like a creep, I can just tell he's a creep, and you're like, that's why I don't like him. I'd be like, well, that might be silly to me, but I get it, right? If you're just, he's got a fucking needle nose face or whatever. It's like, it's stupid, but it's like, okay, whatever, fuck you. Yeah, sure, fine, whatever. Like, if you're getting something specific about him, I don't like him because he's imperious. He brushes people off. He's super fucking smug. He's changed his story on a number of occasions, and when he's had to argue some of the points that he's made, he's gotten absolutely fucking destroyed, and he appears to be what could generally be referred to as a flunky. He is a flunky. If Donald Trump told him to go out and, like, kick over an ice cream stand or he'd fire him, he would walk out the door and kick over a fucking ice cream stand.
I believe that's still in it,
too. So, hold on.
That's why I don't like him. But those are general feelings that I get added to behaviors that I've seen him personally engage in. And the fact that he has proven himself on a few occasions, more than a few, to be an absolute flunky. He'll just do whatever he's told no matter what. Again, that's how the really terrible shit throughout history tends to happen, is some guy like that who's just like, I don't want to lose my shine. They tell me to go out here and do this thing, whatever. It's just a job, and you go fucking do horrible shit.
Look, I don't want to get off subject here. Hold on. I don't want to get off subject here because this is really important. I think that Bennett put like a very good point to what you were initially saying, Joe. but I think that we were on to something with what John and I were saying. We still have not answered John's question. The question is what does it mean to be a follower of somebody? What does it mean to like yeah, I don't think I can put it into any other context than that. Like, what does it mean to follow somebody? Because I'm trying to put ideologies out there where I'm not disagreeing with any of you, but I also want you to understand that these are the constructs of what we've established for society. We still have not answered the question. The question was, like, what does it mean to follow somebody? What does it mean to be, like, involved in somebody's agenda?
I mean, I have thoughts on it, but I'll defer to the floor here.
Well, I guess that part of it has to do with in America. There's a cult of personality which has existed for a long time, where people will just follow somebody if they're forceful or dynamic enough, or they just have that je ne sais quoi. It's a cult of personality. But in the United States of America, based upon the way that we put things together in a republican democracy, generally people follow ideologies, and that was the movement of the 20th century. Be that something like fascism or communism or libertarianism or environmentalism. Like, we are a people who follow ideas more than people, or we would at least think that that's who we are. I mean, a lot of the time we just follow random people, but generally we follow ideologies. Now, we seem to be more sensible about it than a lot of other people thus far, because we haven't had, like, at least since the 1800s, things, whereas in the rest of the world, shit's gone really, really crazy, like tanks rolling up and down the road and bombs getting dropped everywhere. We haven't had that happen. We've had our own problems, but we haven't had that because of an obsession with an ideology or a cult of personality that builds up around somebody like Stalin or...
I was about to
Hitler.
make exactly the same point.
Yeah.
Is when you have strong men, right, that want to gather the faithful around them, they cultivate sycophants. And the sycophants around them are almost more willing to do more fucked up shit than the person, right?
No, which is back to the previous point that we were making. That's one of the reasons I don't like Stephen Miller. But the reason that I'm bringing this up is I think that generally, and there are, of course, exceptions, but I think, the question you always have to ask when you're like, something is bad or how is it? It's like, compared to what? It's bad compared to what? I don't like it compared to what? Right? I hate the way that I'm living my life. Well, compared to what? Compared to what do you hate that? Etc. What I'm getting at is that I feel that Americans are more likely to follow ideologies, even if there are dynamic people within them that have that type of cult of personality. So to follow someone, it's more like following, we tend to follow ideas more than people. Again, there are notable exceptions, but we seem to be better at that than types of people. So when we talk about following someone, it's following.
Well, but just think about the trend in American history of loving outlaws, right? Like, we love our outlaws. We loved, like, Billy the Kid was just some fucking punk kid. You know what I mean? That got in a bunch of scraps and then fucking, was nice to Mexicans, and he spoke Spanish, right? And he got into a fight and, got into some famous shootout, right?
Right.
Now, if you also look at what's his name, the criminal that was souping up the cars and robbing banks during the Depression, right? He was sort of a folkish, almost Robin Hoodish. Obviously that's historiography, but he was treated that way. So in America, we have this thing of liking the outlaws, and there is that element with Trump where it was like, oh, he's outside the system, and he just says whatever the fuck he is on his mind, and that shit does work. You know what I mean? That shit totally functions. He is the Twitter president. You know what I mean? Like, you can't take that away from him.
No, but it's even beyond the Twitter president, because in many decades leading up to the rise of Donald Trump, weirdly,
We love our outlaws, though. I think is the
rise of
greater
Donald
point
Trump-
I was trying
the
to
rise
make.
of Donald Trump weirdly. Oh, I'm agreeing with you, but I'm just going to add a layer to it. The
Yeah,
rise of
yeah,
Donald Trump weirdly coincides with the rise of hip hop, and only until very recently, when he was elected president, was he not held up in many songs that you can go through and you can look online.
Yes.
Song, right? That attitude and that ethos was celebrated, and it was seen as something aspirational within the community of one of the most vibrant art forms produced in America in the last 40 years. And he was held up, and that is a culture which, in itself,
Well, there's something
as
uniquely
embraces a
American
certain-
about loving balls, right?
Well, yeah,
Just having the
exactly.
balls.
I
Exactly.
don't think
So,
that's very unique.
yeah, and
When-
this
when you-
goes back into the point of John, when we just read the Libertarian Detective Agency, right? That
Yeah.
part of the reason that libertarianism is rising in the United States of America, why it does have a legitimate claim, and one day it'll probably have more and more adherents to it, is because it is an ideological distillation of those tendencies into a thought out philosophy. Like the thing that appeals with outlaws, do you think that John Dillinger would have been like, I don't think anybody should be allowed to shoot hair? No.
Yeah.
Do you think that like Nat Turner or like any of these amazing fucking outlaws in the history of this country, you think any of these fucking people would be like, if you want to get blind drunk and just try and row a boat across a river, that we're going to make it illegal? Like, get the fuck out of here. Those people would be like, no.
Well, but it's also like it goes to like what's his name, Johnny Cash, like kicking the lights out at the Grand Ole Opry, right?
Yeah.
Like,
That's theater, though.
no, it is. It's just
Quite
it's just an
literally,
artistic
theater.
reflection of it.
Yeah.
But like, it's in our culture, is what I'm saying. Like, for instance, when you bring up the fact that Trump was mentioned all throughout hip hop, yeah, that's totally true. But I would take it even further and deeper than that. If that you could draw a line between the way that like the swagger, as it were, of like early hip hop idols, right?
Yeah.
All the way that goes all the way back to like Stagger Lee and blues music and the way that like Muddy Waters presented himself as like the virile badass man, right? Like that was the whole like the early electric blues thing was like, I have a big ass car, I can like jizz in 2 minutes time, and you know what I mean, and I got a gun. You know what I mean? Like the whole thing about what was it, Iceberg Slim, right? The whole reason he was called Iceberg is because he was at a bar, somebody pulled out a shooter, shot the shit off, and he had the fucking bullet go through his like 40 style hat through the top, and he didn't move at the bar. He was just sitting there with his drink the whole time, and the bullet went through his hat but didn't hit his head. That's how he got the fucking name Iceberg, right? Like, that's such a blues story, you know?
Total blues story.
The same thing could be said about, what's his name, like Daryl Green or some shit like that. The guy that's from around here. He was on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell was his name? His name is like Daryl something.
The dealer in the 90s? Talking about?
Well, you're talking about the I know who you're talking about. Yeah, the guy who he's a blues player, and he goes around and he basically de-radicalizes KKK members. That guy.
Oh, you talk?
that's-
Yes,
that's-
yeah. He's a blues piano player, right?
Yeah,
like
he's
that's
really
how he
good.
got into is that the dude came to his gig. Yeah, he
Yeah.
was on Rogan. Yep.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, dude. That dude has bigger balls than almost.
Oh, dude, that
anyone
guy
I've
has
met.
huge. But
Huge balls.
I would really emphasize that theme is we have really gotten to the heart of something here, which is basically that you have to think about it. Like, America is a very young country, so like we have not had the historical tests that if you look at a country like France or Spain, you know what I mean, where they just there was really fucked up shit going on.
Yeah,
And
we've only burned our country down once or twice.
Yeah.
They do it
Right.
Every fucking 10 years. But what you guys are bringing up,
We could go as
Eric-
far back as Rome, but
Eric asked what it means to lead or to be led. And then we got onto a conversation about
Well,
badass individuals.
He said.
Yeah, we still haven't answered the
follow
question.
is what he said,
But-
not to lead.
But
to
that's
follow.
what it means.
Yeah.
So to follow means
it's a hard
you're-
question.
No, to follow means you're giving all of your direction, all of your decision making over to another man. And then we listed off a group of individuals who didn't do that, and they're immortal. So that's the point. If you can take control of your own life, then you don't have to question whether it matters who you're leading, because you'll have your own code and you'll say, this is a person who I can still fulfill my own code with and not worry whether their decisions are right or wrong. Because the minute that you have to violate your principles, you'll be able to act accordingly as a follower of that person. Or maybe you won't. And that's why I say that people should think for themselves more often, because it's difficult to say I'm gonna throw behind someone and just take all their decisions for granted. That's why we built a system where you can check people, you can counter them, you can take them to court, you can do all that. Broken as it is, that's the best shot we have. Because the alternative of having 300 million outlaws is obviously unsustainable. And even having, 1 million outlaws isn't working for us.
Make sure you read Big Sam's and Dark Horse.
Yes, please do. But no, I agree, John, that it's just one of the best distillations of that I ever heard. And it was interesting, because I'm going to get off into woo-woo territory here just a little bit, but it was Terrence McKenna. Basically, at one point said, when he was taking a heroic dose, that basically the mushroom told him. The mushroom was basically like, you must have a plan. And he was like, what do you mean? And then it just repeated, you must have a plan. And he goes, I don't understand. And it said, you must have a plan or you will become a part of someone else's plan. Like, it's that notion that, like, what does it mean to lead? What does it mean to follow? Right? And that's going back to my point about, in America, generally tending to follow ideals more than people. Though we can get fascinated with certain types of people, most of them being outlaws aren't suitable for leadership. But when we do, and this is the interesting phenomenon about Trump, right, is that he wasn't really aligned with the ideology which he was espousing. He'd formerly been a Democrat, became a Republican.
Right. He co-opted it, yes.
But then he didn't co-opt it as much as he overtook it.
Well, that's I feel like that's a cinnamon.
Yeah. Well, kind of like, I could see the overlap.
Cinnamons on my...
Yeah. Well. Not only did he take it, as you said, but he also doubled down on it, right? Like, he committed to it, even though it was not representative of what he had said.
Well, he could have ran as a Democrat. That's what he planned on doing.
Well, that's why ultimately, going back to the McKenna thing, it was just like Donald Trump won because Donald Trump had a plan. Now, the only plan that Donald Trump had was he had a plan on how to win, whether it would win or not. Right, but he didn't become a part of someone else's plan, whether it was the Republican Party.
Right, it was his. They got behind him.
Yeah. He had a plan. He wasn't a part of someone else's plan. He overtook the party. But one of the things that we're seeing from all this, exactly as John was just saying, is that, as infatuated as we are with outlaws, I'm hoping it's starting to become obvious that as much as our culture holds these people up, and they are a big part of our culture, they can't be like the tent pole of our culture, or you won't have a culture. It'll just be people running around, which is, again, one of the reasons why, in terms of libertarianism, interesting to me is because libertarianism places, it's attempting to codify parts of an impulse that are very important to our national character, right? It's basically saying that, like, if these sorts of things, these freedoms interest you, it's not just about acting out. There's a series of coherent principles. Me personally, John and I go back and forth on certain things with libertarianism, but that's one reason that I kind of like it. It at least acknowledges the part of the American character which is central to it, which is this impulse to basically be like, I don't like that rule.
Well, that's the thing is that what happens is if you go far enough left, then you start to fucking agree with shit that is the opposite of your position, right? Like, think about it this way. Think about it this way. Just real quick, let me make this point, right? Like, he talked about the principle of how we should decriminalize, right? Like the hard drugs, like heroin and shit, right? Heroin and crack, let's say. So when you do that, when you adopt that libertarian principle, well, then you come to, okay, so how are we going to deal with this? Well, we're going to deal with it as a health problem, right? And as a matter of fact, if you, and it's not like I'm, whatever, like this guy or whatever, but if you look up the interview that Bill O'Reilly had with Playboy, at that point he was like, it was very basic, baseline libertarianism, and he's like, we should decriminalize all fucking drugs and treat it as a health problem. That's what he said. Now, the funny thing is that's a conservative, that's a libertarian talking point, but what it results in is it results in a socialist-style system. Not socialism pure, but like a socialist-style service, right? Which is basically that you have the health infrastructure in place. You have the clean needles. You have the places that they can go to shoot up where, fuck shit isn't going to happen. You do all these things, and then that increases the libertarian style freedom by having that service. Now, how that service gets worked out is a whole nother discussion, right? Yeah. But I'm just saying that there's meeting points where it's like you adopt certain, what you would say, those themes of America that like trend towards the libertarian, and then you get the fucking luxury gay space communism, out of it, right? So I'm just saying there's more meeting ground than people realize.
Yeah,
right?
I would agree to a certain extent with that. Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing I would say is that what you're talking about is a compromise, because at the end of the day, I don't really bother with what like libertarian.
All politics is a compromise, though, right? If you're going to get something done.
The whole point of libertarianism and why you won't, you won't find a purely libertarian country the same way you won't find a purely communistic country.
Sure.
Because you have to make these compromises, and if I have to maintain a government health organization in order to reduce the deaths, imprisonments, and social decay and destruction caused by the drug war, that would be a compromise that is worth considering. The expansion of more, federal aid and health, that might not necessarily be the worst thing in the world, depending on what you believe.
How it's done, right.
And that's what I mean. So it's like, if it's done in a way that benefits people, and the money, it's the same money you're going to spend killing people anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now you've got more people who are pitching into society, who have more of a future to look forward to.
Right.
Who don't clock out at 10 years old the way some people do.
Right.
You don't have whole swaths of the country that are just given up on because of something that may or may not be planted.
Because it falls into the situation of, like you said, and that this is the pragmatic element of politics where these things meet, as you were just saying, is at a certain point when it becomes not just an individual health and safety issue, but when it becomes a public health and safety issue, right? In the same way of having basically having food and safety standards, right? You don't want a bunch of people to get shipments of like produce or meat that are bad, and that there's not a standard for testing them, and so like 1 million people die in a country of 350 million people. Like there are certain things that even libertarians are like, no, you need guidelines, you need agencies to put these things into place. And if it's a public health and safety issue where something could happen on a massive scale, again, if you want to jump off of your roof, I mean, in certain states suicide is still illegal, paradoxically. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
Like it's going to matter afterwards.
What's this law, Kappa?
Yeah. If you fail, well, then they're just like, well, it looks like you broke your neck trying to hang yourself, but we're going to put you in prison now. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that makes no sense at all. Yeah.
But it's crazy. So there are certain things where it's just like, if it's on an individual level, fine. But at the exact same time, that's one of the reasons that the health approach that John was just saying, if it keeps people from being dead, if it keeps like violence from rising, if it keeps people out of institutions and buildings where they will basically, that are not rehabilitory, but they're essentially finishing schools for criminals. Like when you put a fucking 17-year-old in prison for fucking trying them as an adult because they had a plant on them, dude, it's not going to rehabilitate them. It's going to make
it's
better,
gonna make it, yeah.
Period. That's what it is.
It's going to make a tougher, colder killer.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what it does.
Somebody less likely being able to be folded back into modern society.
Yeah, no, that's what it does. Prisons, specifically, when you're being placed in for offenses like prostitution and minor drug possession or even major drug possession, when you're for doing what you want with your body or for having possession of something that is on an evolutionary scale millions of years older than you, and if it shouldn't be here, I don't know why the fuck it is. You better explain that one if you're any sort
of okay, so
but
you're drawing a lot of light on the fundamental postmodern problem post World War II, which is that now you're in the system, right? You're in the system. You're in a system that's like stacked against you, and in terms of individual rights, like you're just in this machine, right? And I think one of the nonpartisan points that we can really agree on is nobody wants to have infrastructures of human organization that are fucking bureaucratic and useless. You know what I mean? So, like, for instance, when we treat the health if we treat the hard drugs as a health problem instead of a criminal problem, right? Nobody wants that infrastructure to be, this like bloated government thing that just doesn't fucking work. You know what I mean? Like, nobody wants that on either fucking side. No. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the problem. Part of the problem is that there are individuals who kind of do want that because then they can have largesse and
they can have money and power and
live the lives that they want.
Anywhere there's inefficiency in human organization, somebody stands to make a profit, right?
Exactly.
It's a lot like Kafka's The Castle, or what's the other story? The trial.
The trial.
Right.
But yes, there are certain individuals who do want there to be a system like that, and they're corrupt people. Again, this is the endemic problems of the system, which is when I originally came into this the first time. It was like the endemic problems of the system, but this is what it is. Like, that would probably be mitigated to a great degree if the individuals that we chose to put in charge of those systems, there was some kind of basic metric by which you knew that they were the person to put into the office, right? You know that they have a track record, they're smart, they've had successes with things that they planned out in their lives. Ideally, you'd like them to have at some point a little bit of experience with something political, specifically the higher that the office is. But also, you just want to know in a certain sense, through their actions and their record as a human being, that they're a trustworthy individual. We don't have those metrics anymore, right? A classic example is that the ancient Romans, if you were a civil engineer, and the Romans stole or repurposed a great deal of the traditions that were around them, from the Greeks to the Egyptians to the Babylonians. But one thing that they were very, very good at is that they were good at civil engineering and to build bridges in Rome, which was exceptionally important, and they were better than anybody that did.
Well, hold on, time out.
Hold on, stop. I'm almost to the end. Almost to the other side of the world, with the exception of possibly China, they made really good bridges, and they had amazing civil engineers. They were very good at it. But to be
good at it prior
to be a civil engineer. To be a civil engineer, basically, if you were building a bridge, the test that you would use of their character is that you had to live under the bridge while you were building it, and for a specific amount of time after you had built it. You'd have to build a base
control.
Right. So if the bridge fell down, you were going to fucking die.
I did not
live. That was during a period of the Republic, I think, extending
I totally understand
the empire. But, like, we have no metrics for that anymore. It's just like, well, what risk are you personally taking? How do I know that you stand behind the work that you've done before, that I can trust you?
That's during the
I totally agree with everything you're saying.
That shit is not like that.
What I'm saying is that everything that happened prior to the Macedonian age, which is what you were talking about, or the Macedonian age that you were talking about, people were already doing those things. I mean, you're talking about people that were of the same, that could have been of the same race, that were enslaving each other and still doing the same shit prior to that era.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, then it brings a great point, which is that just thinking in terms of what John was saying, as far as, like, the libertarian, value of smaller government, but also more efficient government, right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's the point.
what Bennett's highlighting is that if you look at the Republic in the early Principate, right? Like they didn't even call it emperor at that point, even though functionally that was true. The fucking
Functionally, it would have been after the Macedonian era.
the government consisted of like a couple of bean counters, the military, which functioned. The Romans invented Western modern, corps of engineers, right? Like the Roman army built the roads, they built all the forts, they built all the infrastructure, right? Like it is the first professional military in the West.
Yeah,
I mean,
That's not true. That's not true.
Earlier,
That's not true. That's not true.
well, there was lots of armies, but they also did contribute to architecture, right? Because the army was their workforce basically for the government, right? But the Romans, the one thing that they were a syncretic culture, much like we're a melting pot culture. And the one thing that they did do really well was the fucking military engineering, man. They built all those roads, maintained the post office, all that shit. But it was a very...
What you guys are talking about is after the Macedonian era. They were already
the entire Roman
civilizations and entire governments that were doing that prior to the Romans.
Oh, no! I'm not just
doing what? Doing when you say doing that, doing what? What do you mean when you say doing what?
But we're talking about military reign, and we're talking about
we're talking about military engineering of civil structures. That's what we're talking about specifically. We're not talking about armies fighting people.
As that branch of governmental structure, because if you think about it, the Roman Empire didn't have at the beginning, it didn't have bureaucracies. It was basically you had a couple of clerks running the accounting and the judicial system, and then it was basically the military and the Senate, and that was it. You know what I mean? It's nothing compared to the system that we have now, especially post World War II, as far as the federal agencies like that. So, I mean, that came later in the Roman Empire. Like when you get to Diocletian reforms after the crisis of the 3rd century, right? That's when you start to get like, like post Reagan-esque, like largesse of government. You know what I mean? So,
well, I mean,
I don't know.
We don't even have to go that far back. I was reading something about Ghana, and like right after independence, Kwame Nkrumah was a socialist. He thought Pan-Africanism meant that our unique community style in Africa would lend itself to communism in a way that a lot of other cultures wouldn't have the same connection. So that was the basis of that economy and that whole country. And I think as recently as like a couple years ago, there's 192, ministries in Ghana, and Ghana is the size of Delaware. So imagine you have, instead of just a ministry of transportation, you have a ministry for air travel, you have a ministry for train, a ministry for street, for road, or even more diffuse for motorcycle versus 4-wheel travel. Imagine, because that's the cancer that is government. It feeds on itself to create more of itself, to benefit itself at the cost of whatever its host is. And the argument of what I was reading was that the origination of all these countries in Africa was a communist planned economy origination, which is why nobody bothered to fight that. They would just choose who was in charge. But it's a cancer on itself. So you're spending all your time vying for power because that's an externality of government, and bad government too. And the fact that when it is allowed to grow, according to your plan, it is inefficient. So you can't protect the things that you have, and you can't protect the people there. So everyone gets taken advantage of. Yeah. And the accountability that Bennett is talking about is basically, you made sure that your rival didn't kill me, or you made sure that your rival didn't steal from me. But in order for you to do that, I'm going to pay you a big, or a tithe, basically. It's mob rule.
Yeah. So to get back, to get back to John's point, then, based off of what John said, based off all of the
all of the perspectives that we've made, what you're saying, John, now is that you would argue that what it means to follow somebody means to be militant for that person.
No, it means giving up your decision making possibilities. I mean, even
I would
pare
go
it
back.
down even further. Like when people talk about relationships and they talk about partnerships and stuff like that, what does that mean? When you're a partner with somebody in a business, it means one thing, you know, or it could mean a lot of things. And when you're saying, am I following somebody? Like, that could mean a lot of things. I'm saying that there are certain characteristics when you're following somebody, you're allowing them to make decisions on your behalf, and you're assuming, or I'm assuming that you have certain goals in common, you know. But that's not always the case. Specifically with our country, and I think it's a tradition they should bring back, is when you won the presidency, the runner-up became your vice president.
Yeah.
So before, because I'd really like listening to
You mean more like coalition-style government, which
Well,
totally
some
makes sense.
aspect of that, yeah.
what I'm saying is, because I really like listening to everything that you guys are saying, because it gives me more perspective on things I don't understand. What I'm saying is that, so if you don't argue that point, then at one point do we decide that we don't agree with everything that that person stands for us? Because at the end of the day, we don't have any choice to agree with somebody that has the same fundamental ideals as whatever it is that we promote.
Okay,
we always
so
have that choice.
let
we
me
always have that right.
let me jump in here.
At what point do you stop supporting that person?
Stop supporting and to counter that person, to actually take arms against that person, are two different things. I don't think
Yes.
there's anybody I've ever supported in office at any point, you know, but I'm not ready for armed revolution, but they're pushing it to the point where I'm questioning why we haven't done that already.
Right. Okay.
There's
So
enough on
but
the
that's what
table
I would
to
agree with.
justify what you're talking about.
I would agree exactly with what you're saying, John, which is basically that there's a certain pressure that's been put on, right? And I think in this country, especially if you look at the history since 1980 and on, we're overdue for some civil unrest in this bitch. Like if this was France, there would be a lot more burning cars in the street.
Yeah,
You know, like
in terms of the accountability situation, I agree with what you're saying, and we're overdue for something. But I'm gonna take what John said about the vice president and a thought experiment that I've been playing with before. If you were like, how can we know if the person that we have as president is going to do a good job? Because I'll just pick the highest office in the country. There need to be standards for everything. I pick the highest office because it is said, and there is some evidence to support that during the first dynasty in Egypt, the person who would become the pharaoh would reign for an 8-year lunar cycle, and in the 8th year of their reign, they would be ceremonially sacrificed under a new moon.
holy shit!
And they would die. Now they would get to be the pharaoh, and they would run things. But what would it look like if we were like, okay, if we elect you president, you can be the president for 8 years, and then you have to give your life for your country. Like, if you want this much power, this is what it's going to cost you, because we don't have time to fuck around and see if you're a thief, or if you're a liar, or if you're a psychopath, or whatever the case may be.
It's funny how the syncretism of democratic politics and old style Indiana Jones Temple of Doom-ish religion is combined
Yeah.
10,000 years ago in an Egyptian political system.
There's evidence to support that. The first place I ever read of that was in Joseph Campbell's The Masks of God. It was in I think it's in the first book, which
The
is
Mask of God. Should we look that up?
the
That
masks
seems
of
like a.
yeah, the Masks of God. You may be able to find.
I did watch his entire. Who was it? Was it Moyers that
Moyers,
interviewed
yeah.
interviewed him?
That's
I watched
great
that whole
interview.
shit on because I mean I obviously
Netflix.
you can't study Star Wars or
No,
any other mythology
without Joseph.
without knowing something about the Campbell. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
So
sorry. So what was the name again?
it's the Masks of God, and then it's the first book, which is primitive mythology, because it's primitive, Oriental, Occidental, and creative.
This is basically your global polytheism, but
Right.
also with the Proto-Indo-European
Right. Yeah.
aspect to it. The shift from the mother goddess to the patriarchal
Yes,
god.
it gets into that a fair amount. But if you look in, if you can do a search on it, just like primitive, masks of God, primitive mythology, Egyptian pharaoh sacrifice, it might actually bring the paragraph up. Through
Oh, okay.
But if it doesn't, but anyway,
No, wait, Joe, hold on, wait, go back to the wiki page.
Okay.
That link that says the hero with 1,000 faces.
Oh well, that's the hero
Which is
cycle, the Dan
That's-
Harmon
yeah.
circle, right?
Oh, okay. I thought that was the same thing.
no, that's the
The title's Masks of
God.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see if there's a.
Ski mess.
I thought it said ski mask. of God.
Ski
I was
Mask
like,
that's a nice little
Ski Mask the
American
Slum
rapper. Ski Mask the Slum
Oh,
God.
God, that's awesome. That's an awesome name, dude. That's fucking fantastic.
What is a slump rapper?
Okay, so it's included in the main article. So let's go here.
Yeah, you probably.
Here we go. Mythology from around the world, ancient to modern.
No, I was meaning just like never mind. I was just meaning like a Google search. It might actually get you the paragraph. But don't worry
Okay,
about
give me no. I like this idea. Let's give me the Google string that you want.
Masks of God, primitive mythology, and then Egyptian pharaoh sacrifice. And if we don't get a reasonable hit on the first one, don't worry, because it's buried. I think 2/3 of the way through the book. It's not buried. It kind of.
I love this because this means the next time I boot up my browser, it's gonna like have the news articles that will come up. The fucking crazy.
Oh, dude,
shit.
it will be crazy. It'll be fucking nuts.
Okay.
Mm,
Let's see here. Can you see good?
yeah, I can see.
Okay.
It must be sacrificed during God's descent in the period of the Alexandrian Pharaoh Ptolemy.
Let's look at this one.
Go to that word trade. No, go to that word trade. No, wait.
One's
That
gone.
word trade, all the way.
Yeah, it's either gonna be the word trade or the first one.
Go to that word trade, Joan, down
Yeah,
there.
so
It's gonna
it's-
be the actual.
Yeah, try it. Look
this
at word
one?
trade.
The Joseph
No.
Campbell. No,
Joseph
no.
Campbell.
Oh, this one.
Yeah,
Word
that
trade,
one.
yeah. Check that one, and then the top one as well on that page. And just type in Pharaoh.
Some God mythology, primitive, right there.
No, it's
Oh,
just
this is yeah.
the
Oh,
second
no.
one of the book. So just go
Oh, fuck
go-
you.
go back and just do a page search for Pharaoh.
Hey, check us out.
I'm sorry, you're saying Bennett.
Joseph Campbell.
Don't worry. You can look it up on your own time, but it should be there.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me what this paragraph that we were trying to find says.
Oh,
again.
it says essentially what I just was saying. Like I just
Yeah.
thought it might be in more detail, which
It's
is that
symbolic death.
every 8 years. Well, it was a well. That's John brings up a good point, because it started out as a literal death, and they would do this, and then one day this guy, as human beings are wont to do, who was the Pharaoh, was like, "Hey guys, high priests, let's all just calm down with our obsidian sacrificial knife. What if you just kill an effigy of me?
Let's
and
just
I
do some rituals.
ceremonially come back to life
Why don't you just kill a slave that looks just like
me.
He may
so-
or may not be my son, but I don't give a fuck.
Mhm.
You
Well,
bring up a really deep
It
point
just came
that
down
I'm
to
glad
the-
that we've gone down into this territory, into this deeper
Yeah.
stratum, because because when John was talking
Accidentally.
about, remind me a lot of Hobbesian social contract analysis, right?
Yeah.
Because like if you draw the contrast between Locke and Hobbes, like a lot of American founders were all about the Locke.
Yeah.
We've only done an hour.
That's that it's all the contract is between the people and themselves, right?
Yeah.
But in Hobbes, it's not like that. In Hobbes, it's no. It's not that the people have a contract with whatever body is the regulating body, right? It's more like the person that Locke thinks we're making the contract with, they're not in the contract. That's the way. This is what Hobbes says. He says the contract is between the people and themselves. Like, okay, you won't kill people, you won't like fuck your own sister, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
If you took that anthropological angle on it, right? Like the taboos of society, here's the codification, you don't do these things. The only thing that guarantees that is somebody standing outside the contract. So that's why it's Leviathan, right? Like that's why the state is Leviathan, is because the royal personage, and for us that's embodied in the institutions, rather. It's stratified. But now, of course, we were talking about the concentration of presidential power that's increased since the beginning, right? Like that's the irony of Jefferson being the guy that's like, no, we need more protections against the president becoming royal, and then he's like, oh, I'll just break the law. I'm Jefferson, bitches.
Well, that's why people love Washington so much. He was our Cincinnatus.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
He looked at all the power and he was like, guys, I didn't even want to be general.
I'm going to go farm.
I just like sitting around chewing tobacco through my wooden fucking teeth, you know, and
But I mean they literally had the order of Cincinnatus, right? And the whole deal with Cincinnatus. We were talking about the Romans, his whole deal is the reason why he was the ultimate dictator, not in the bad sense, in the old sense, like the leader that was elected to lead the army, is because he always went back to farming. He always laid down his arm. That's what Washington did, that like imitated, you know.
Yeah. Like there was a crisis, they called him up, he did his job, and he fucked off. Like in a perfect world, that's what you need from a leader. Someone who abides by the same rules he's meant to enforce.
Abides, but also abdicates, right?
Well, yeah,
right.
And that's why we have term limits. That's why we don't want to let any entrenched interests create a segment for themselves. But I've been listening to Patrice O'Neill all week.
Oh, dude, yes.
So if
currently
we're talking,
on my rotation as well.
Yeah, if we're talking about libertarianism, I'm extending that to even just man liberation.
Oh yeah. Oh, sure,
everything.
Sure.
But he was talking about who's the guy that briefs the president. You guys were saying that he broke the mold by coming in and being outside of it. But as soon as he used his plan to get in position, he was now part of another person's plan. They came, they sat him down, and they said, shut the fuck up, you jiggly jowled bitch. Like, you don't know what you're doing, and that's obvious, but we have shit we've been working on for decades, and you can't fuck that up. And they've been watching him fuck it up for 3.5 years, and they've been trying to get him out ever since. And there's power, and then there's the guy that you can't fire.
Yeah.
There are people that the president can't touch.
I mean, look, he's been going to town, though, because ever since he got fucking acquitted, right, like, he's slowly been, like, weeding out any checks. Like, what was the recent news to just this past week is he fired another inspector general that was, like, you know, trying to do their job or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, there's been a purgy aspect.
Well, he has to, because he legitimately has more leaks than any presidency I've ever seen.
Ever.
Well, because he's incompetent. There's going to be leaks if you're incompetent.
You're going to come to that conclusion no matter what.
No. If you look at the objective evidence,
Tell me
Yeah.
what the objective evidence is. Compare him to a different president. You tell me how he's doing a better job or worse job than they are because of incompetence.
I feel like that's a apples and oranges thing.
But you're saying there's objective proof, and I'm saying that if you have this many people against you from the beginning, you got an uphill battle. Even the people that were supposed to support him are part of a different class of people, are part of these people who already have a plan in place. His plan isn't associated with that. I can much more see somebody trying to derail him in their fucking wacky racers, Hanna-Barbera attempts to knock this guy out. Like, there are so many things.
So my question to you is then, what is your evaluation of his presidency? Do you think that he's on average more or less competent than previous presidents?
There's no measure of competency for a president.
Well, then what is your measure of competency?
I ignore them. I ignore each and every one of them, and then I laugh at news stories. That's what I do.
I mean, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that cynical angle, but like, while we're on the topic, right? Like,
what is this president supposed to do?
No, it's all a part of the same topic. Okay, like, I think that we started at a question and it is developed into this. I think that we've said a lot of specifics about what we look for and people that we follow. And then on top of that, have also made ideologies about what we all respectively feel like is our angle. So with that being said, like, the principle of trying to follow somebody is how far you can go to support that person that is about the fundamentals of what your ideology is.
Guys, on that question, I'm gonna have to peace out. I gotta jump off here.
all right,
Yeah.
man.
Again, which is just as well because I don't have an answer for Eric's question. It's a really good question. I don't know.
I would just like to say before I don't think, talking about Trump, I don't think we got specific enough. If we're going to talk about a specific person, I think we should have specific crimes or places where he screwed things up. I'm not going to say he's a perfect leader. I didn't choose him. I don't care what he does, except for in the way that I care about generally what most governments do. But I think that, it's much easier to talk about the history of things and what we were talking about before. I think it's really easy just to call him incompetent, but that's just because it's not his world. He's been part of it for a very short time. And to be a smooth operator, he's not Bill Clinton. He's not spent his life doing this. So that's the part I love. I love that he keeps bumping into furniture in the dark, because then it shows us exactly how the room is set up. We don't get to see that as
Good metaphor.
As people
I
on
agree.
the outside.
I agree with John.
No, I mean, I do think that there's that aspect is definitely operative insofar as what we were saying earlier is that he's more a product of what the system means, and he's not the root problem. The root problem is the system that produced his president.
Yeah, we're shitty institutions and they're crumbling.
I think
Right. They're crumbling. Right, exactly.
Going, like, if you wanna go ahead and peace out, Bennett. I think that we can keep going. We can keep this going, guys, because I don't have to end the meeting. I mean, we could. This is like ongoing until we decide to peace out.
Cool, fellas.
All right, Bennett. It's good.
I apologize for showing up late.
No, it's all good.
I'll be on time next week, guys. Be safe. Thank you very much. Kwame laughs. He's like,
Yeah.
"Of course you will be." Fuck you. All right.
Next week, let's just listen to Patrice O'Neal for 3 hours.
I mean, dude, I also have a lot to say on that topic. I also have recently joined the cult of Black Phillip.
Black
Look at fucking Eric.
Bitch better have my money.
Yeah, exactly. He has got a lot of good points.
Got all the good points. He never lied.
No, he didn't.
He's really aggressive about it, but he's never wrong.
Yeah, it wasn't some
I don't think
polished
it's fair to say that. I
philosophy
don't think
piece.
that
It was
any of
very
us-
natural.
like I'm not trying to be like mediator here, but I'm saying like I don't think any of us are ever wrong about what we're saying.
You're wrong all the time. Just waiting for somebody to figure it out.
No, I just think that
And
we all
to
have
have the jujitsu
no,
to
Well,
I
take me
just think
down.
that we legit.
Okay, but
no. All jokes aside, for real, like I think that we all have very opinionated. We have all very opinionated feelings about what the facts are. I mean, the facts are there. We're not saying anything that's outside of what's the truth. We're all
okay,
We're talking
just
about Black
interpreting it
Phillip.
the way
Kid.
we want to, and we're
yeah.
having debate about it. So
Okay, so but just to wrap that angle up, like there's only two goals in an intellectual conversation on a sort of totalistic human emotional plus rational level, right? And that is one, you either taking your fucking ideas out and you're displaying them like commercial goods and being like, don't you like my fucking ideas? Don't you think my ideas are better than yours? And then you put them back inside of you, right? And then there's the other real, what I would say, classical, like, 16th, 17th century liberalism, which is you discuss ideas because you want them to be tested, because then your ideas become better, right? And that's what I think, when me and John talk or whatever, like the fucking difference is like there's no value to my fucking ideas unless they can be defended against operative other viewpoints, or they can be transformed in some sense. You know what I mean? And so that I don't mind the the challenging of this or that value, because like that's the whole point of it to me.
Yeah, they're only
I agree.
they're only there to help you function in the world better. And if your ideas aren't good, your actions are shit, then you're functioning like a moron, and it's obvious. Like if your ideas are bad, then the consequences of your actions will be bad.
Well, it's also that like ideas get sharpened by real intellectual debate, right? Like, and if you're gonna get hurt by somebody countering your viewpoint with a rational argument, then it's like then you're just there to display your ideas and be like, oh, don't you like my fucking ideas? Like, aren't my ideas better than you? And when you get into like the bar conversations, right, or you get into the like 4 o'clock in the morning, everybody's fucked up debates, right?
Yeah.
It gets into the sort of merchant aspect of the idea. Like, look at my wares. Don't you like my wares?
What are you
With your
buying?
ideas.
What are you selling?
Right, exactly. It's more like a marketplace of like, what's the value of my shit, right? Like with my ideas. Like it's a very egotistical thing, right?
I don't think it's much different even if you're writing a book. Like
Okay. Before
even
we
if you don't
No,
have direct competition
before we
at
get
that
too off
moment, you're
subject,
competing against what's already in somebody's head.
oh,
And you're
of course.
competing against their experiences. You're saying that this way is better than your way, and here's why. And or even if you aren't saying that, you're saying this is the way that I've used and it works, and here's why.
Right, there's always an angle, yeah.
And that's what I mean. So ideas should always be based in something that benefits that person, which is why to bring it back to Patrice, it's like
There's some freedom going on your block, isn't there?
well, that's why I left the first time. I thought there was something going on down the street. Thought somebody was fucking with my car. But
Right.
yeah, it's if you listen to Patrice O'Neal for 10 hours as a woman, that's still not necessarily gonna be the best way that you can think of. But if you talk to some of his ex-girlfriends, they only had positive things to say about the guy, even though he sounded like the world's biggest misogynist.
Yeah.
So it's not just about, is it sound palatable? Because sound and practice are two different things the way we interact with ideas and conversation and how people do it, like, you know, when we're talking about competence versus incompetence, I kept thinking about Obama because honestly, I don't know if anyone can remember specific points about his presidency or anything like that. And he was seen as a very competent person. He was articulate. He could read a script.
Oh, I remember.
He dressed well.
I
Who
think
you
you
talking
know
about?
what I remember too.
I'm
About
sorry.
like,
I didn't catch the name. Which president?
you see, Barack Hussein Obama.
Oh.
Who? But yeah, like competency for.
I was just talking to Kelly today about Bushism, and apparently she doesn't remember that term.
She doesn't remember that because that was everything. That was everything. That was 8 years of anger and fury.
Bushism. You don't remember? But do you remember Bushism, Joe? Bushism.
Yeah.
I was talking to her about that literally like an hour ago, and she was like, I don't remember anybody ever talking about Bushism.
I mean, yeah, they talk about it all the time. Like they thought he was the Antichrist. I heard more Antichrist comparisons for Bush than I've heard for Trump. You know, Clinton was the Antichrist if you're a certain kind of Republican.
Oh, most definitely he was.
Which one?
And then, you know, and you can always trace it back. People thought that each of these guys had their faults. And
no. Which Clinton are you talking? Which Antichrist are you talking about?
The one that actually won his election.
Can we talk about the Clinton like list of people? That was a big deal in the 90s, I remember, especially in the early internet. It was circulating around a lot. Was the list of people that died during the list of people, including the FBI guy that was showed up in D.C. floating down Rock Creek in a fucking canoe, just fucking dead. Like a John Le Carre novel, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But there was this list circulating around of all the people that have died under the Clinton.
Yeah, it's like 50, 60 people that mysteriously decided that life was too hard. Too hard to live around the Clintons.
Or they were just tired of dealing with Clintons.
Just tired of living in the world without the Clintons.
So here's what I got, right? So John or Beneganov gave us the answer for what is the price of following somebody, right? So at this point, if we can apply it to the realities of what's happening within the last few days and the next couple of days, I mean, where do we stand as far as your own? I mean, we all live in the same state, first of all. But I want to know how you guys feel about what's happening in our state and what we can do federally moving forward.
I'm buying a gun.
I mean, it's not a bad move. Might as well make the investment now.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, then I'm gonna go get training as soon as they open that shit back up again because I want to know how to use it.
Yeah, no bullshit.
I have no faith that even accidentally the right decisions are being made. I don't like
Baltimore is clearly getting treated a lot different than other areas too.
Yeah, and Baltimore's still closed.
I thought Baltimore was open, as far as I understand.
The mayor decided not to open up, even with the governor's suggestion. So what people have been posting is just, you guys hear the motorcycles and shit. None of that has slowed down even for a second out here. So people have been posting all these gatherings and different things that the mayor won't encounter or he won't do anything about, even with this pandemic. There was maybe a few days where there was like a clear, I mean, they've closed like the channels between here and DC. So the MARC is reduced hours, the trains, the buses, all that stuff is reduced. But like the people who still have to go to work still go to work. People who are still dealing drugs still deal drugs. People who are still. I saw the horses today. I saw those crazy fuckers. I almost got the name of her farm, but it was such a thick accent I couldn't understand it. I needed a fucking translator. Um, Nothing has changed.
You're gonna start riding them Jones too, Joe.
I need to find out because I am. But the thing is, it's gonna be me.
Take my horse to the old town road.
It's not
Eric's
that
got the
far.
advantage of sitting on a couch, right? Like,
Yeah. But that's what I mean. So
Ride till I can't no more.
to give all these decisions to a group of people who are so divorced from the people that they lead means that they discount how people act, they discount their natural tendencies, and they discount what people are going to do anyway. And it's spring, and I've seen 5 times as many beach shots, albeit lonely beach shots, than I've seen in the last couple of days. People are going to go out, they're going to do whatever they feel like doing. They're going to do it as safely as they can, but they're not going to give everything up because the governor said so. And then you're going to get in situations where people are going to be arrested and shot.
You're making a
because of this
truly
shit.
valid point, John. But I mean, let's not pretend that that's like just Baltimore.
No, that's my point. It's everywhere. There's human nature versus, oh, we have the best interests in mind. Like it's horseshit.
at the same time, I'm out here in the burbs. There's curfew at 8, right? Like, that's the whole deal, right? So I went to the gas station late, and it's like, I got my pack of cigarettes or whatever before 8. And it's fucking Saturday, right? So I'm just hanging out. I have nowhere else to go except right back home. So I'm just, before I get back in the car, I got the car parked in the gas station little side parking lot. And I'm like chilling, right? I'm like, I'm going to sit down on the curb, right? And first of all, it was Saturday, so a bunch of people are pulling up and getting gas and getting their shit at the gas station, like, before it's 8 o'clock. But I'm there after 8 o'clock, just hitting a jack, right? And I look down from where I'm sitting on the curb on the, parking lot or whatever. And there's a whole shit ton of butts here, right? It's like people are still going places, right? Like there was a bunch of butts, like there was a bunch of activity, right? Like I'm looking there, it's like, sun's going down and people are pulling up, a couple of like dudes on motorcycles pulled up, they were parked next to me. Some young guy pulled up next to me while I'm like playing a chess game, just chilling in the parking lot, right? Because there's nowhere else to go, right? I just need a change of scene, right? Like I need to not be in the house, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's all this activity, you know what I mean? And so I think you're right. Like but there's also an aspect of it is like, okay, they've like put all this shit into place, but like, and I know, like I said, I think Baltimore is being treated a lot differently, and you could say that for a lot of areas, right? Where it's like sometimes they're using it as this like bullshit crackdown, and they're being like, oh, break up this funeral or whatever. But also there's in some places there's a like certain hands-off aspect, because I was there till like 8:30 or whatever, and it's not like any cops pulled up. And there obviously socioeconomic and American historical factors like play into that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. But when he's like, when you keep talking about this, Eric, like, oh, when is this shit gonna end? It's not gonna end.
Yeah.
It's changing.
No, I don't think my
society
point,
works.
I think that my point is about finding out whether or not it's going to end. I think my point about what I'm saying to you two, has more to do with, I mean, where do we draw the bottom line, right? So the bottom line, based off of what I've heard, and I can go into detail about how I feel about all these things too, given the opportunity. But based off what I've heard. At what point does the bottom line become about either the justification that we're trying to make about the federal government or about local government? Because here's the thing, right? I think that we have a lot of control over what we can do on a local level. We may not have the funding, but I think we have a lot of control about how we make sure that our people are safe. And so at one point,
In terms of what?
in terms of the coronavirus, in terms of unemployment, in terms of healthcare, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's across the board. All these things are like essential across the board answer. I mean, across the board questions. At what point do you decide that, like, hey, we can't do this for ourselves? Should we be doing it individually? Should we be looking for the federal government to bail us out, as some people like to say, or should we be looking to our local government to be able to make means for us to do these things ourselves?
I mean, and this will probably be my final contribution. The whole point, and I think you rightly positioned it, is like, who should we look to? Is you should look to your fucking self. You should look to a much lower rung than the government, because as a rule, they can't meet your needs as well as you can. And, you know, people were taking care of themselves and didn't need unemployment just fine before they shut down the economy and made it illegal to go to work. Now we're going to see cases of people getting fined and arrested for going to work and trying to make a livelihood for themselves. There's no constitutional right that gives you the power to take that away, emergency or no emergency.
But I want to make a sort of.
So I'm sorry to cut you off, Joe, but look, let's just hear me out. We could talk about like the headlines that Joe has pulled up right now. We're talking about just an explosion in downtown LA causes fires, several buildings, blah blah blah. I mean, these are the same things that happen in DC, Maryland, and Virginia every week, despite the coronavirus or not despite the coronavirus. People are still dying, period. So at what point do you decide that this is on a federal level and this is something that they need to take care of? Or you're like, well, yeah, let's just jump out there and try to go help.
How? Like, do what?
No. What I mean is, it's like, obviously you don't have to do anything because it's none of your business. But I'm saying
no. I mean, like,
no. But when is it community based and when is it federal based? When do you have to make decisions based off of something that is going to be federal or community based? This doesn't have anything to do with the pandemic. What I'm saying is that when do you make a decision based off of something that is a part of your local community, or when you need to get the government involved?
I don't know, but
it's so heavy. Like, and we're just
yeah.
I mean, that's the whole point. We're talking about legitimacy of governments, and honestly, I would love it.
Well, to answer also what Eric was saying as far as the civil unrest part is, like, if you think that there's going to be some sort of coherent, political movement coming out of this, like brazing the line of like, okay, when do people get to like the boiling point? That's going to be very, very murky and relative. You know what I mean? It just goes to the point that John was making a couple episodes back, right? Which is when he was saying like, oh, these protests are bullshit, right? Like, and as somebody that has lived in DC for a long time and went to school in DC, You know what I mean? Like the bullshitness of the regular protests that go on like every year. If you contrast that to the level of discipline involved in the protests during the civil rights era, I'm talking about people's individual level of discipline.
What's the point?
You know what I mean? If you compare that to what goes on now,
Yeah.
it's a fucking shit show, and it's a bunch of useless bullshit. You know what I mean?
What
Like,
I mean.
it just jams up traffic for regular people is basically what it does.
Most modern protesters don't even have the benefit of their principles because they don't test them. They don't put them up against their counter ideas. They don't talk to people they disagree with. They don't even approach people they disagree with. Now they're pulling down videos off of YouTube, Twitter, everywhere because they counter the narrative. Like, it's insane. And you've got these spoon-fed motherfuckers. Yeah, what is the point where you buck and you say that there's no legitimacy left? And that's what I mean. Like, there is several points. We could have made that argument over the last 3 decades. Over the whole course of my life, there's been points where I could have woken up and said, well, shit, they were doing more for less in the 1700s.
Yeah.
Just the whole structure of the Federal Reserve should just creep you out.
Yeah, definitely.
The whole fact that they just printed another $3 trillion yesterday we should be burning shit right now.
Exactly. But that's what I'm saying is that any kind of thing that happens here is going to be incoherent. You know what I mean? It's not like there's not going to be some sort of like solidly unified political opposition. It's going to be.
That's my point. So yeah, they're going to keep you divided. They're going to show you how the protesters in Illinois were white and they had guns, and that's racist. And then they're going to show you a protester who's black and he had guns, but that's fucking woke.
He's going to be murdered in the streets. Yeah.
And then he doesn't get murdered, and then the fucking right-wing guys are going to be like, well, see, they got the same rights. You should all be on the same side. And then for half a fucking second, everybody shuts up and they said, yeah, why aren't we on the same side? Then they go back to bickering about who's more racist and who's more oppressed. It's the dumbest shit in the world.
Well, with that being said, I think John and Joe, I think there is a lot.
You've been Fed posted this whole time. I start talking truth. It's over.
I think that there is a lot of purpose behind what or who we decide to follow, and I think that without giving context to, or without even giving consideration to what we all believe, then we're going to be in this perpetual state, regardless of the pandemic, regardless of social justices, and regardless of the things that happen.
This is forcing people's hands.
We're going to have to continue.
I thought that was the point you're getting to. This is forcing people's hands to look up and make decisions. And while it may not be coherent, everyone has to realize you have to serve a master. You have to have a code. You have to have something real in this life. And it's not the celebrities. It's not the politicians. It's not even the fake-ass ideologies that have been creeping their way into everybody's minds the last few years. Because there has been a whole lot less fucking, not civil liberties, but just the social justice bullshit has fallen away to an extent because people are realizing how ridiculous it is to argue about bathrooms when you don't get to go anywhere if they don't let you. We were working today and I wanted to take a shit in public and they were closed. That's
too.
All of them. Yeah, it's not black and white toilets. That's just essential, non-essential functions. They just decided it's
That's a
too
good
dangerous.
point.
It's too dangerous to keep the John open. It's fucking ridiculous. It's absurd. And
I just want to know if you made it in time.
I have discipline.
Oh,
I
we
was.
stopped. No.
I am
no,
zen.
Look,
I am
we stopped
zen.
back at
It's a
my
valid
house.
question.
We
Yeah.
stopped back at my house to make sure that we shit before
He asked
we
if I made it. That's assuming that the opposite of made it is me with a stain in my pants, Eric. I made it. Could have stopped at any point for the rest of the day. But that's my point. When you start making decisions that don't necessarily benefit people, but they definitely make it so you're unable to sustain yourself, you can't sustain the lifestyle that you previously enjoyed.
I mean, that's
And
a
they're just-
very good point because the ability to fucking take a deuce that is a sustainable need, like
just
on a daily basis.
and to go back to civil rights. Imagine I was working in some white building and they're
Right.
like, "Oh, the shit right here, boy. You got to go around." The
Right,
back."
like they did to
That's
the
when I
NASA
wouldn't
lady.
make
Yeah.
it. That's when I'd be, "Oh, boss, I didn't make it. It's all over the floor, boss. It's disgusting. It's this segregation. I had to segregate myself from my mud pie in your fucking lobby, you disgusting twat." And that's what I mean. If you go back through the history of even segregation, there's a lot to say that a lot of people didn't have any use for it. Why would you as a business person say half of your clientele can't come in here and you can't charge them the same prices? People got fucking rich off of old racism. You got to charge black people twice as much for rent because it was, it was seen as dirty or undistinguished or whatever. There's so many stories where it's just a government idea.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, Batman has killed people for lesser reasons.
I can't. It's
I
putting me
can't
on the
speak for Bruce
paywall. But
Wayne.
If you don't sit here and tell me that Batman hasn't killed half of his enemies, then you're a
Kills all
liar.
of them. And they're all
no,
just
but
regular people.
just to continue that bathroom thread.
Oh yeah, the guy who blew
The
up
guy,
bathroom.
the guy who fucking was like, "Oh, I gotta go blow up the bathroom." Now we all know what that means, right? Like,
You get some uptight fucking.
but some Karen was like, "Oh my God, we're in danger."
Idiotic. Idiotic. All right, guys. We're creeping on midnight, and I'm going to go get some.
Yeah,
Um,
I think we've covered a wide gamut of points here tonight. Somehow unified. But
you guys are too generous.
bathrooms to Roman Empire. I mean,
that's why they lasted so long. You could shit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of one of the same. Anyway,
there's more freedom. You could shit anywhere.
You shit on my olive tree, you fucking slave piece of shit.
You can just shit in the streets. I'll just take a shit right here.
If that was the case, then India would be a worldwide powerhouse. You've never seen the Poo in the Loo public service announcement?
Their numbers are good right now for how dense their population is.
Look up Poo in the Loo. There is a fucking state-sponsored song to get people to not shit in the street in India.
oh no.
It is and there's a
You say who in
you
the
know
loo?
what?
no Poo. Poo.
Hey Joe, close it out with this song.
Poo in the Loo.
Just do it. Just do it. Just close it out with this song.
There you go.
This one right here?
Yeah,
Oh my God.
it's
Oh,
fucking incredible.
we're gonna get in so much trouble for this on YouTube. But just
No. It's all over YouTube. This is an old one, man. It's got the bubble gut. He's dreaming of shit. I can't believe you guys have never seen this.
all right, Joe and John. Thank you guys as usual for always coming out.
There's no better way to end it than
We're gonna poo out of here. And,
slide right out. We're just slide right out on this.
Oh
we're just gonna slide right out.
I didn't even start singing yet.
John, you always have the best picks.
We'll be back same time next week.
All
Later.
right.
I won't stop watching unless somebody else does.
I can't hear it.
I'm
though.
not
Is
gonna
it
leave
fucking-
until you.
Oh,
leave.
you can't hear it? Hold on.
There it is.
Next to you. Where is that blue? I step out on the street. What do I smell? Shit, that's stinky. I step away, but everywhere I go, there's no getting away.
Is your taxpayer dollars?
Lagay na pekiniche, happy birthday. Lagay na pekiniche, happy birthday. जहाँ मुड़ेगा वही मिलेगा हर जगह सलाम मारेगा no shit this is that shit push it no shit कुतुब मीनार गेटवे ऑफ इंडिया चार मीनार जंतर मंतर खेत के अंदर एयरपोर्ट के
For that reason,
क्या हगना मना है oh yeah हगना मना है तो क्या हगना मना है 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 oh yeah
Take a deep breath.
हगु
Take the pool to the loo. Take the pool. We gotta do what we
I forgot about this. Let's go.
gotta Let's take the pool to the loo. 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 Everywhere. Next to you. Everywhere. Where is that blue? Let's take the pool to the loo. Let's take the pool to the loo. Let's take the pool to the loo. Let's take the pool to the loo.
Oh, you're muted.
Let's take the pool to the loo. Let's take the pool to the loo. Let's take the pool to the loo. Let's take the pool to the loo.
Make this song your caller tune. That's how you know.
I think I'll probably just live in the toilet anyway.
Oh yeah, that's the making of. There's a making of, but that's for a different day. Holy shit. Yeah, we could just be an internet archivist site and just walk down the roads of all this fucking cringy, disgusting shit.
Maybe we should do that first thing next time. Is just go fishing a little bit. You know,
I could find you some sturgeon out in these choppy internet waters.
All right, John, Charm City 360 tours. Look him up. This is an ongoing thing. If you need housing, you better hit him up because, I mean, these places are going fast. You better look out. Jogo, DJ Two Goats out here doing the radio show.
that's right.
Every day of the week after hours. You can check him out. And hey, I think that's our show.
All right, buddy.
Good to see you guys.
Night, y'all.
All right, you guys. See you next week.